They called him a scavenger, clay, a worthless piece of meat, incapable of finding a single soul stone. Yet he held in his filthy palm the petrified egg of a spirit beast, for which, on the other side of the universe, they would have given 18 stones. And no one in this village even suspected who had come to them. Daniel Hahn opens his eyes and chokes on the dirt. Above him is a foreign sky, high, pale as faded silk, not Seattle's. 3 teenagers in patched robes stand over him. One kicks a sack of stones and cackles. Daniel doesn't understand a word. And then he understands everything at once, as if someone had flipped a switch in his head. The scavenger, that's what they call him. He's dragged in another sack of worthless rock, not a single soul stone, useless clay. Daniel sits down. A foreign body, thin arms, scrapes on his wrists, rags for shoes. He looks at his palms and doesn't recognize them. The teenagers laugh. One leans over and throws something that even a pig would find more useful. Daniel looks up. He smiles. It's his professional smile. Warm, slightly guilty, disarming. 12 years behind the auctioneer's gavel have taught him one thing. Smile like that and people will forget why they came to scold you. The teenagers fall silent. Daniel reaches for the bag, pulls out a gray stone, twirls it between his fingers. A habit. For 12 years, he'd twirled other people's things in his hands. Grandma's cups, records from garages, porcelain under a layer of cheap paint. And every time, his fingers told him more than his eyes. The stone is warm, too warm for a simple rock. The layers are twisted into a spiral, as if something had grown inside, as if something had once lived inside. He holds the stone, a second, 5, 10, and he sees, not with his eyes, deeper. A product listing unfolds in his mind like on an auction site. The petrified egg of a spiritual beast, 400 years old, worth nothing in this world, worth 12 to 18 soul stones at the interdimensional auction. Daniel blinks. The listing fades. He puts the stone back. He stands up. His knees are shaking. His head is spinning, but inside it's quiet and clear. That's what happens when you find something at a flea market for 20 cents and realize it's worth 20,000. He asks where the market is. The teenagers exchange glances. One taps his temple with a finger. A third points down the path. There is no market. There is the village of Silent Springs, the village elder, a well, 27 households, and not a single soul stone because the Scarlet Phoenix sect scoops up every last bit. Daniel nods. He slings the bag over his shoulder. He heads down. The village lies in a narrow valley between 2 slopes of Mount Beishan. Gray stone, darkened wood, collapsed roofs. Skinny, angry chickens peck at the ground as if hoping to find something edible in it. Daniel walks down the only street and counts. A habit. At auctions, he always counts first. How many people are in the hall? How many have money? How many came just to gawk? Here, he counts the houses. 24. 4 are abandoned. Old people, children, tired women, no young men. Except for one. A guy in his 20s stands by the well. Straight back, broad shoulders, calluses on his hands aren't from the fields, from a sword. He looks at Daniel as if he were a cockroach, too lazy to crush him, but too repulsed to tolerate him. Daniel takes note. The herbalist lives on the edge of the village. Her house is the smallest, but the neatest. Bundles of dried herbs hang by the entrance. It smells of bitterness and smoke. An old woman sits on the threshold. Her face is like a baked apple. Her eyes are sharp. She doesn't want trash. He replies that he didn't bring any trash. She snaps that everything he brings is trash, because he's clay, and clay never finds anything of value. Daniel sits down next to her, without asking. Another habit. At auctions, the one who sits down first wins. The one who stands asks. The one who sits decides. The old woman's name is Grandma May, the only herbalist for 3 villages. Her husband died 15 years ago. Her son died 10 years ago. She has a granddaughter left. The girl is about 6. A cough comes from the house, wet, heavy, a child's. Grandma May presses her lips together and turns away. Daniel stands up and goes inside. The girl is lying on a cot, pale. Her cheeks are flushed. Her forehead is beaded with sweat. He touches her forehead. A fever. A high one. He isn't a doctor, he's a merchant. But he knows one thing. When something falls apart before your eyes, you either find a buyer right now or lose it forever. He goes out. Grandma May sits just as she was sitting. She isn't crying. She stopped crying long ago. Daniel looks around the yard. He picks up a cracked clay bowl. It's heavy. The glaze has worn away to a pale white. For 30 years, dough was kneaded in it. Every day. By one woman's hands. The datasheet unfolds in his mind. Handmade clay bowl. Age, 40 years. Material value, negligible. Emotional value, critical. Over 10,000 hours of conscious labor by a single owner. Value to a collector of relics, 3 to 7 units. He sets the bowl aside. He takes a fragment of a wooden comb from the shelf. His husband's comb. 3 teeth are broken. Then a flat stone with a carved hieroglyph. From his son's grave. Grandma May wipes it down every morning. Then a pinch of ash from the hearth that never went out a single day. 4 objects. Daniel sits down on the ground. He closes his eyes. Inside his head, a dark plane spins with points twinkling like stars. Each point is a buyer. Thousands of worlds, millions of buyers. And among them, he must find one. The one who needs these 4 things most of all. Daniel assembles the lot. 4 items, each containing a whole life. A bowl where dough was kneaded for the family for 30 years. A comb with which a man combed his wife's hair every morning. A stone from his son's grave, which his mother tended for 10 years. Ashes from the eternal hearth. The buyer is found instantly. A collector from the world of 1,000 sorrows. There, the value of an item is measured by the amount of grief invested in it. There, such things are worth their weight in gold. Daniel names his price. 1 pill of returning breath, the lowest grade. The buyer agrees. The exchange. Daniel opens his eyes. A white pea in his palm. Smooth, almost weightless. He enters the house. He places the pill in the girl's mouth. Grandma May freezes in the doorway. She is silent. By dawn, the girl is chasing chickens around the yard. Her cheeks are rosy. Her eyes are clear. She laughs. Grandma May falls to her knees. Tears stream down her face. She doesn't understand what has happened. Daniel drinks a bitter brew from a cracked cup and says only one thing to her. No one here knows how to judge things properly. That's all you needed. The old woman stares at him for a long time. She goes into the house. She returns with a hot flatbread. She places it on his lap. She says he's a fool. But a fool who saved her granddaughter can eat her flatbreads as much as he wants. Daniel takes a bite. The flatbread is hard and bland. There's almost no salt. But it tastes like home. A taste he hasn't had in 20 years, not since his grandmother died in Seattle. He chews and watches the girl running. He doesn't know where he is, doesn't know how he got here. He doesn't know how to get back. But he knows one thing. This place is full of things that no one else knows how to appreciate. And he does. And that's enough for now. The day flies by. Daniel walks around the village. He listens. He's always listened more than he's spoken. At auctions, it's not the one who shouts the loudest who wins, but the one who listens most carefully. The village is dying. You can see it without even trying. The fields yield less and less. The spiritual herbs on the slopes of Beishan sprout once every 3 years instead of every season. The earth's veins are drying up. The young people are fleeing to the cities. The old people are waiting. No one knows what they're waiting for. Maybe death. Maybe a miracle. Daniel learns about the Red Phoenix sect. They control the entire eastern slope of Beishan. Every 3 months, a collector comes, 1/10 of all spiritual materials. If you have nothing to pay with stones. If you have no stones, pay with labor. If you have nothing to pay with at all, the village is declared a chi polluter and purged. The village of Quiet Springs hasn't paid for 2 quarters in a row. Daniel asks when the collector will come. The village elder turns pale. In 3 days. Daniel nods. 12 years behind a hammer taught him this too. A deadline isn't the problem. A deadline is motivation. He returns to Grandma May. He sits down on the threshold. He asks her to tell him everything about the Red Phoenix sect, and about the other sects, and about the soul stones, and about how this world works. The old woman looks at him as if he were crazy. She sighs. She pours him some more herbal tea. She begins to speak. The Juhua continent, the 9 blossoms, 9 great sects. Each holds its own peak and the lands around it. Spiritual chi is the foundation of everything. It is extracted from ores, herbs, and animal cores. Soul stones are condensed chi in solid form. They are used to pay for everything: training, medicine, protection, life. Those without a talent for cultivation are called clay. Clay does not control chi, does not fly on swords, does not ignite fire with a snap of the fingers. Clay digs, hauls, gathers, and dies. Daniel listens, memorizes, sorts it like a catalog, fact by fact. By nightfall, he knows enough. The world is dying. Resources are running out. The sects are preparing for a great war. Small villages will be the first to go under the knife. And he has 3 days. He lies down on a straw mat by the hearth. His granddaughter is already asleep, breathing evenly, healthy. Grandma May covers him with an old blanket and calls him Danny. Daniel closes his eyes. He smiles. 3 days. That will be enough for him. The morning of the second day began with a scream. Daniel jumped up on the mat and hit his head on a low beam. A rooster was crowing in the yard, not an ordinary rooster. This one sounded as if someone had stepped on a bagpipe. Grandma May was already standing by the hearth. Flatbread, bitter tea. Her granddaughter was sitting on the floor and was drawing on the ground with a stick. Daniel rubbed the bump on his forehead. He stood up. He went out into the yard. The morning air was cold and clear. Mount Beishan loomed over the village like a wall. On its slopes grew trees that Daniel didn't recognize. Their trunks were silvery. The leaves were long and narrow. They swayed in the wind even though there was no wind. Daniel squinted. Then he turned away. 2 days. He had 2 days left. He ate breakfast. The flatbread was just as hard as yesterday. Grandma May said there wouldn't be any more because they only had enough flour for a week. Daniel finished his tea. He picked up the bag, the one with the gray stones. He poured the contents onto the ground in front of the house. 32 stones. He began sorting through them, one by one, 10 seconds for each. The cards unfolded in his mind. The first stone, ordinary quartzite, 0 value. The second, sandstone with iron impurities, 0. The third, 0. Fourth, 0. Fifth. Daniel stopped. The stone was slightly darker than the others, slightly smoother to the touch. The card unfolded. A fragment of fossilized bark from the Tree of 8 Fragrances, approximately 500 years old. The species is considered extinct on the Juhua continent. Low spiritual value in its current condition. Collectible value at auction ranges from 40 to 60 units, with a proper lot description. Daniel set the stone aside. He continued. Of the 32 stones, 4 turned out to be valuable. Petrified bark. The petrified egg he had appraised yesterday, a piece of rock with micro-inclusions of spiritual metal, and a strange, flat stone that turned out to be a fragment of a destroyed seal belonging to an unknown sect. 4 items out of 32, 12.5%. At auctions in his past life, this rate was considered excellent. Usually, out of 100 items from a flea market, only 2 or 3 turned out to be valuable. Daniel put the 4 stones into a separate pouch. He stood up. He walked over to the village head. The village headman of Silent Springs was a thin man in his 60s. His name was Yun Bohai. He was sitting in his house on the only chair, drinking something cloudy from a clay mug. His eyes were those of a man who had long since stopped waiting for good news. Daniel entered. He sat down on the floor. He asked exactly what the village owed the Red Phoenix sect. Yun Bohai looked at him with a sorrowful expression. 120 soul stones, 2 installments of 60, plus a late fee, another 30, a total of 150. The village had 0. Daniel nodded. He asked what would happen if they didn't pay. Yun Bohai answered with a single word: purge. He said it as matter-of-factly as if he were talking about rain. Daniel asked if anyone from the sect had come by before. Bohai said a collector had come 6 months ago, lowest rank, an outer disciple, took everything there was, 8 stones. He laughed, said that next time, more serious people would come. Daniel asked who commanded the punitive squads in this area. Yun Bohai paused. Then he said a name: Ho Jimin, Golden Fan, an inner disciple of the Scarlet Phoenix sect, the son of one of the Ho family's younger branches. Young, arrogant, likes to come in person. Daniel asked why. Yun Bohai finished his murky liquid and replied that Ho Jimin likes to watch. Just watch. How houses burn. How people run. Sometimes he doesn't kill anyone. Just stands there with his golden fan and watches. Sometimes he kills everyone. It depends on his mood. Daniel thanked the elder. He went out, stood on the street, thought. He couldn't gather 150 soul stones. The 4 precious stones in his bag were worth between 60 and 100 units at the auction. But the auction doesn't pay directly in soul stones. It exchanges one item for another, of equal value. So he doesn't have to pay the debt. He has to make the debt irrelevant. Daniel went back to Grandma May. On the way, he was intercepted by that same guy from the well. Young, broad-shouldered, the calloused hands of a swordsman. His name was Jong Yon Ho, the only person in the village with a spark of talent for cultivation. He had left to join the small Silver Crane sect. He studied there for 2 years. He came back. He didn't say why he'd returned, but from the way he clenched his jaw at the mention of the sect, Daniel understood. He'd been expelled. Jong Yon Ho blocked his path. He asked what Daniel had given Grandma May's granddaughter last night. Daniel replied that it was medicine. Jong Yon Ho asked where he'd gotten the medicine. Daniel said he'd found it. Jong Yon Ho grabbed him by the collar of his robe. He pulled him close. He said that if a trash collector steals, he'll personally tear his arms off, because one thief could get the whole village wiped out. Daniel didn't struggle. He looked Jong Yon Ho in the eye, calmly, without fear. Not because he was brave, because in 12 years at auctions, he had seen hundreds of enraged customers. Men who thought they had been cheated, women who screamed that the price was too low, collectors who threatened to take them to court. Daniel had learned one thing. An angry person wants you to be afraid. If you aren't afraid, they have nowhere to direct their anger. It starts to get in their own way. Jong Yon Ho was holding him by the collar. Daniel said nothing. 10 seconds later, Jong Yon Ho loosened his grip. He stepped back. He spat. He said he was watching him. He left. Daniel straightened his robe. He walked on. At Grandma May's house, he sat down on the threshold. He took out a flat stone, a fragment of a seal from an unknown sect. He held it for 10 seconds. The card unfolded to reveal more details. The seal belonged to the Azure Lotus Abode sect, one of the 9 great sects. Their territory began beyond the western ridge of the Beishan Mountains. It was a diplomatic seal. Such seals were affixed to documents of patronage. A village or school bearing such a seal was under the protection of the Lotus Abode, and no other sect could touch it. The seal was broken. But Daniel turned the stone between his fingers, half a character on the chip. The carving style, the age. It was a genuine seal, not a forgery. Someone had broken it intentionally at some point, to remove the village's protection, to make the village accessible to the Scarlet Phoenix sect. Daniel closed his eyes. He entered the auction space, a dark, endless plain. Flickering dots. He formulated a request. I need a document, a pass or a charter confirming the Azure Lotus Abode sect's patronage over the settlement near Mount Beishan. Authentic or legally indistinguishable from the original. For the village of Quiet Springs, so they can survive until next season. The auction flickered. The request was being processed. Then the response came. One lot available. A charter of temporary patronage from the Azure Lotus Abode, valid for 1 year. Legally valid if the original seal, or a fragment of it comprising at least 30%, is present. The exchange cost is equal to a fragment of the Azure Lotus Abode seal, plus 1 item of emotional value no lower than average. Daniel opened his eyes. He has a fragment of the seal. It is exactly 30%, as if someone had deliberately left exactly as much as was needed. The second item, an item of sentimental value. Daniel sat on the threshold and thought. Grandma May came out of the house. She handed him a cup of herbal tea, hot, bitter. He took the cup with both hands, sat for a while, then stood up. He walked to the ravine where he had woken up yesterday. The place was unremarkable, a hillside, rocks, mud, grass. But Daniel knelt down. He ran his hand over the ground. This was where he had opened his eyes to this world. This was where his second life had begun. He scooped up a handful of dirt, clenched it in his fist, closed his eyes. 10 seconds. A card, soil from the rebirth site of the auction carrier. Spiritual value, 0. Emotional value, high. Symbolic value, unique. Daniel smiled. It'll do. He sat right down in the mud, closed his eyes, entered the auction, listed the lot. A fragment of the seal of the Azure Lotus Abode and a handful of soil from the place of rebirth for the village of Quiet Springs, so they might be safe for at least a year. The exchange took place instantly. When Daniel opened his eyes, a scroll lay on his lap. Thick, ivory-colored paper, a blue seal with a lotus, the text written in elegant calligraphy. A charter of temporary protection. Day 3 began with silence. Not the usual morning silence, but a different kind. Heavy, sticky. The village knew they would come today. Daniel left Grandma May's house at dawn. Fog was creeping across the valley. Mount Beishan was hidden behind a white veil, and only its peak jutted out like the tip of a spear. The street was empty. The doors were shut. The shutters were boarded up. People sat in their homes. 24 courtyards. 20 of them inhabited. About 70 people in them. Old people, children, women, and one former disciple of the Silver Crane sect who stood by the well with a sword at his belt. Jong Yon Ho. He didn't move. He stood right in the middle of the village, feet shoulder-width apart, hand on the hilt, a stony face. Daniel approached him, said good morning. Jong Yon Ho didn't answer. Daniel said that when the squad arrived, there was no need to draw his sword. Jong Yon Ho turned his head. He looked at him as if he had spoken in the language of fish. Daniel said he had a plan. Jong Yon Ho asked what kind of plan a lump of clay could have. Daniel took a scroll from his bosom. He unrolled it. He showed it to him. Jong Yon Ho read it. He turned pale. Then he blushed. Then he turned pale again. He asked where it came from. Daniel rolled up the scroll, put it back, said it didn't matter. What mattered was that when Ho Jimin appeared, they had to let Daniel speak. Just speak, no swords. Jung Yun Ho was silent for a long time. Then he nodded, once, briefly, as if that nod had cost him all his strength. Daniel stepped back. He sat down on the porch of the village headman's house. He took one of the remaining precious stones out of his bag, the petrified bark of the tree of 8 fragrances. He twirled it between his fingers. He waited. They arrived around noon. First, a sound, the rhythmic clatter of hooves, not horses, something else, heavier. Then a smell, burnt, metallic. Then a shadow. 5 figures on the road. 4 in red robes with a phoenix embroidered on their chests, swords at their belts, their faces covered by masks. The 5th walked in front, unmasked, young, about 25, handsome, fine features, long hair tied in a high knot, pale skin, eyes black and shiny like wet stone. In his right hand, a golden fan, opened, glittering in the sun. Ho Chi Minh, the golden fan. He walked unhurriedly, every step precise, calibrated, like a dancer, or an executioner. He entered the village and stopped. He looked around. He smiled. The smile was beautiful and completely empty, like the window of a store that had long since closed. 4 men in red robes stood behind him in a semicircle. Silence. Daniel sat on the porch of the village headman's house. He didn't stand up. He didn't bow. He watched. Ho Chi Minh noticed him. He tilted his head, like a bird that had spotted something interesting on the ground. He approached. The fan swayed rhythmically in his hand. He said he hadn't seen that face here before. Daniel replied that he was new. Ho Chi Minh asked, "New to what?" Daniel said, "New to the village." Ho Chi Minh laughed, a quiet, melodious laugh. He said it was funny. Usually people leave the village. And here, someone had come. To a place that might cease to exist in an hour. Daniel shrugged. He said he was a commodity expert. He appraised things. And that the village seemed undervalued to him. Ho Chi Minh stopped laughing. He looked at Daniel more closely. The fan stopped. Daniel didn't look away. Everything inside him tightened. Fear. Real, primal fear. This man could kill him with a single movement. Daniel understood that. But at auctions, rule number 1 goes like this. Never show the seller that you want his item. Otherwise, the price will double. Ho Chi Minh closed his fan. He snapped it against his palm. He asked where the village head was. Young Bo Hai emerged from the house behind Daniel. Pale, shaking. He fell to his knees. He began to speak. Something about a poor harvest, about disease, about how they would give everything they could find. Ho Chi Minh listened with a slight smile. Then he raised his hand. Young Bo Hai fell silent. Ho Chi Minh said the village was in debt. 150 soul stones. That's a lot. That's a great deal for a village that produces nothing but filth and cripples. He said he would justly clear this territory, return the land to cultivation, allow the qi to flow freely without obstruction from human refuse. He spoke calmly, beautifully, like a poet reciting verses about the sunset. And therein lay his true horror. Daniel stood up, slowly. He pulled the scroll from his bosom, unrolled it, held it out to Ho Chi Minh. He spoke a single sentence. The village of Silent Springs is under the protection of the Azure Lotus Abode. Silence. Absolute. Even the chickens fell silent. Ho Chi Minh took the scroll. He looked at it. His face didn't change, not a single muscle. He read slowly. Then he turned it over. He looked at the seal, rubbed it with his finger, brought it to his nose, sniffed it. Daniel stood and waited. His heart was pounding. The document was genuine. The auction house doesn't deal in fakes. But Ho Chi Minh could have cared less about the document. He could have torn it up. He could have killed everyone and claimed there was no document at all. But Daniel knew something. At auctions, there is one type of buyer who cannot be deceived, but he can be stopped. This is the buyer who doesn't want the item. He wants the process of buying. He likes to haggle. He likes to win. And if you offer him an item that can't be bought, he doesn't get angry. He gets interested. Ho Jimin rolled up the scroll. He looked at Daniel. His eyes were shining, not with anger, with curiosity. He asked where the clay in that forgotten village. Daniel replied that he had found it. Ho Jimin said that didn't happen. Daniel said it did if you knew where to look. Ho Jimin laughed. This time the laugh was different, not hollow. There was something alive in it, something dangerous. He tossed the scroll back to Daniel. He said the letter was genuine. The seal was genuine. The Red Phoenix sect wasn't at war with the Azure Lotus Abode over a village of 20 old men. Not yet, anyway. He turned to his 4 companions. He nodded. They turned around. They walked back down the road. Ho Jimin lingered. He looked at Daniel over his shoulder. The fan opened. The gold plates glinted. He said he would remember that face. Then he left. Daniel stood there. His legs were buckling. His hands were shaking. He shoved the scroll back into his bosom. He sat down on the porch. He inhaled. He exhaled. Young Bohai was still kneeling. His mouth was open. His eyes were as wide as saucers. People began peeking out of their houses. 1 woman, 2, an old man with a cane, children. Grandma May stood at the end of the street with her granddaughter in her arms. She was looking at Daniel. John Yon Ho stood by the well. His hand was still on the hilt, but his face was different, not stony, confused, like a man who had prepared to die, but death had passed him by. Daniel looked at them all. He smiled. That very smile, warm, slightly guilty, and he asked if anyone had any tea. Because his hands were shaking, and he needed something hot. Grandma May snorted. She went to make some. Daniel sat on the porch and watched the fog lift over the village of Quiet Springs. The village had survived. For a year. 1 year. Over the course of this year, he had to make sure it would never again be a village that could be wiped out. But that was tomorrow. Today was just tea. In the evening, the village came alive. It wasn't celebrating. They hadn't celebrated here in a long time. But something had shifted. People were coming out of their houses, talking, looking at Daniel. Some with suspicion, some with hope, some with fear. Yun Bohai came to Grandma May. He sat down next to Daniel. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked who he was. Daniel said he was a commodity expert. Young Bohai said he didn't know that word. Daniel said it was a person who looks at things and tells how much they're worth. Young Bohai asked how much this village was worth. Daniel looked at him, then at the houses, at the mountain, at the children playing in the street for the first time in a week. He said he didn't know yet, but he was going to find out. On the 4th day, Daniel started working. Not the way the villagers worked, not in the fields, not in the quarry. He worked with his eyes and hands. He got up before dawn. He took an empty sack. He went to the slope of Mount Beishan, alone. Grandma May said it was dangerous to go up the slope. There were spirit beasts there, small but vicious. Mountain rats with stone teeth, snakes that spit acid. Daniel said he would be careful. Grandma May said that caution doesn't save you from stone teeth. Daniel went anyway. The slope began about 50 paces from the outermost houses. Silver trees, the very ones that swayed without wind. Daniel approached one. He placed his palm on the trunk. 10 seconds. Card, moon tree, a common species in the spiritual highlands of the Juhua continent. The wood has no spiritual value. The bark has a mild calming effect when brewed. The leaves are useless. The roots are deep and absorb residual qi from the soil. Market value at the auction, 0. Daniel removed his hand. He moved on. He spent 4 hours on the slope. He touched everything in sight: stones, grass, soil, snags, mushrooms on dead tree trunks, moss, bones of small animals, feathers. He moved as if in an antique shop, methodically, row by row, shelf by shelf. Of the more than 200 items he had assessed that morning, 11 turned out to be valuable. 3 mushrooms that looked like ordinary toadstools but turned out to be spores of the Thousand Dreams mushroom, a rare alchemical ingredient. 2 stones with flecks of spiritual metal. 1 root that stuck out of the ground like a dry stick, but turned out to be the root of the grass of the forgotten dawn. Dried, it was worth very little. But if soaked in water with moon dust, it became the base for mid-tier pills. 4 feathers from some kind of bird. Daniel hadn't seen the bird itself, but the feathers lay at the foot of the cliff. The auctioneer identified them as feathers of the twilight pheasant, a bird considered extinct in this region. The feathers themselves were worth little, but for a collector from a world where birds didn't exist at all, every feather was like a work of art. And a single bone fragment, large, thick. The auction house identified it as a fragment of a mountain ox rib. The beast had gone extinct 100 years ago. The bone was imbued with residual chi. In the right hands, it could be carved into a comb or a hairpin that would slowly replenish its owner's chi over the course of several years. Daniel gathered everything into a bag. He returned to the village by lunchtime. He sat down by Grandma May's house. He laid out his finds. He began to think. Just sell everything at the auction and get food. That's an option, but a bad one. The sack of grain will run out. A pill will cure 1 person, and then what? No, he shouldn't sell it. He needed to create a system. At auctions, Daniel had seen how small stalls became big ones, not because they had 1 expensive lot, but because they had a steady stream. 10 cheap lots every day bring in more than 1 expensive one once a month. The village needs a steady stream, but the villagers don't know how to see value. They walk along this slope every day and see only rocks and grass. So we need to teach them, or at least show them. Daniel called Grandma May. He laid out his finds in front of her. He showed her the mushrooms. He asked if she knew what they were. Grandma May looked at them. She said it was a toadstool, poisonous. Children sometimes eat them and then get sick. Daniel said it wasn't a toadstool. It was the spore of the Thousand Dreams mushroom, an alchemical ingredient. In a proper apothecary, they'd give 3 soul stones for a single mushroom like this. Grandma May looked at the mushroom, then at Daniel. She'd that he was lying. Daniel said he wasn't lying. He showed her the root. Grandma May said it was just a dry stick. Daniel said it was the grass of the forgotten dawn. If you know how to process it, you can make a base for medicines. Grandma May was silent. She looked at the items laid out. Then she said quietly that her son was used to say the same thing, that the mountain was full of valuable things, that you just had to know where to look. A mountain rat killed him later when he climbed too high. Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he said he wouldn't climb too high, but he needed help. He needed someone who knew the mountain, someone who knew the trails, someone who could walk the slope every day and gather whatever Daniel pointed out. Grandma May said there were some kids, teenagers, the very same 3 who had laughed at him in the ravine. They climb the mountain every day like goats. They know every rock. Daniel nodded. He called the teenagers over. They approached warily. The leader of the group was a 14-year-old boy named Peng, skinny, quick, shifty eyes. A typical from the streets. In another life, he would have been running through the alleys of Seattle, stealing gum from stores. Here, he ran up the mountain, looking for anything that glinted. Daniel sat down in front of the 3 teenagers. He showed them the mushrooms. He showed them the feathers. He showed them the stones. He explained that he would pay for every item they brought that turned out to be valuable. Pay with food, for now. Peng asked why they should trust him. Daniel pulled a petrified egg out of his bag, the very one from the first day. He held it for 10 seconds. Then he said, "This is the petrified egg of a spirit beast. It's 400 years old. It was lying in a ravine by the trail you walk every day. None of you picked it up. And if you had picked it up and taken it to the city, they would have given you 50 soul stones for it." Penn opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, asked how Daniel knew that. Daniel smiled. He said that was his job, to know how much things were worth. The teenagers exchanged glances. Penn nodded. They went up the mountain that very hour. By evening, they brought back 2 sacks. Daniel sorted through them. Most of it was junk, but 4 items turned out to be valuable. Another mushroom spore, 2 stones containing spiritual metal, and a dried flower that the auction house identified as the last flower of the ice camellia, a plant that blooms once every 40 years. The dried flower itself was worth very little, but Daniel knew something. At auctions, there is the concept of provenance, the history of ownership. A painting is worth 1,000. The same painting, with a document stating that it hung in the living room of a famous writer, is worth 10,000. The same painting with a story about how the writer bought it from a street artist in the rain in Paris is worth 100,000. The object plus the story equals value. Daniel closed his eyes. He entered the auction. He described the lot, the last ice camellia flower, picked on the slope of Mount Beishan in a village on the brink of extinction. The flower was plucked by a 14-year-old boy who didn't know what he was holding in his hands. To him, it was just a pretty flower for his mom. His mom died 2 years ago. A buyer was found quickly, not from the world of 1,000 sorrows, from another world, the world of eternal gardens. There, flowers never wilt. There, a withered flower is a paradox, an impossible thing. They were ready to pay. Daniel named his price. A sack of white millet seeds, a grain resistant to poor spiritual soil. Harvest in 2 months. 1 sack could sow the entire village field. The exchange took place. Daniel opened his eyes. The sack stood before him. Heavy, full. The grains white and round as pearls. Grandma May saw the sack. She approached, reached out her hand, scooped up a grain. She looked at Daniel. Her lips trembled. She asked what it was. Daniel said it was the future. They would sow the field. In 2 months, the village would have its own harvest. Grandma May dropped to her knees. Not before him, before the sack. She pressed a handful of grain to her chest. Daniel turned away, not because he didn't want to see, because there are moments that belong only to the person experiencing them. Jun Yon-ho stood to the side. He watched. He was silent. Daniel saw him out of the corner of his eye. His face was complex. Not angry, not grateful, something in between. Like a man who spent his whole life building a wall and then saw someone simply walk around it. The next day, Daniel got up before dawn again. But this time, he didn't go up the mountain. He sat down by Grandma May's house with 3 teenagers. He laid out all the valuable finds from the past 2 days in front of them. He explained each one. He showed them how to distinguish the spore of the Thousand Dreams mushroom from a common toadstool. By smell, the spore smells like burnt honey. By color, if you look at it against the light, you'll see a faint bluish haze. By weight, the spore is lighter than a toadstool because inside it isn't pulp but a void filled with dormant chi. He showed them how to identify stones with spiritual metal. By sound, tap 2 stones together. An A, normal stone, makes a dull thud. A stone with spiritual metal rings out, thin and clear. Peng listened. His eyes burned. The other 2 teenagers did too. These were children who had been told their whole lives that they were useless, that they were clay, that nothing depended on them. And then a man came and said that gold lay beneath their feet. They just had to bend down and pick it up. They went up the mountain. Daniel stayed behind. He had another task. He went to the village elder. Yun Bo-hai was sitting in his chair, drinking a murky liquid. Daniel sat down across from him. He said the village had a year of protection. During this year, 3 things needed to be done. First, Sow the field with a new grain. Second, organize the collection of valuable materials on the mountain. Third, open a trading post. Not in the village. No one comes to the village. At the fair at the foot of the mountain. Grandma May told him about the fair. Once every 10 days, at the crossroads at the foot of Beishan, peasants from the surrounding villages gather. They trade in small goods, food, cloth, sometimes cheap, low-grade pills from traveling merchants. Young Bohai listened. He was silent. Then he asked why. Why all this? The certificate protects them for a year. In a year, they'll come again. And then no fair will help. Daniel looked at him. He said that in a year, the village would have soul stones. There would be goods. There would be connections. In a year, the village of Silent Springs would cease to be a village to be pitied. It would become a village that it would be profitable not to touch. Young Bohai finished his drink. 10 days later, Daniel was standing by the side of a dusty road at the foot of Mount Beishan. A mat lay before him. On the mat were 4 items, 3 spores of the Thousand Dreams mushroom in small clay dishes, and 1 stone with flecks of spiritual metal on a stand made of moon tree bark. This was his stall. The fair at the foot of the mountain was not a fair in the sense that Daniel knew it. No tents, no signs, no organization, just a patch of trampled earth at the crossroads where 2 roads converged into one. About 30 peasants from the surrounding villages. They spread rags on the ground. They laid out their wares: turnips, salted fish, ropes, coarse canvas, hoes with jagged blades. Everything was gray. Everything was shabby. Everything reeked of sweat and exhaustion. Buyers wandered between the rows, just as gray and tired. No one had any money. They traded by barter: fish for rope, rope for a hoe for a sack of turnips. Daniel stood by his mat, waiting. Penn stood nearby, serious, alert. He'd asked to come along himself, said he wanted to watch Daniel trade. Daniel let him. Auctions often took on apprentices. The best way to teach is to let them watch. For the first hour, no one approached. Daniel wasn't worried. At any auction, the first hour is quiet. People walk around, look, take a closer look, make up their minds. Then an old man approached, skinny, hunchbacked, with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at the spores, asked what they were. Daniel said they were spores of the Thousand Dreams mushroom, an alchemical ingredient. The old man asked why he would need an alchemical ingredient. He wasn't an alchemist, he was a carpenter. Daniel asked what was hurting him. The old man was surprised. Then he said his back. It had been years it's been hurting. Daniel nodded. He said that when brewed correctly, the spore of the Thousand Dreams mushroom produces a decoction that relieves muscle tension for 3 days. It doesn't cure, but it provides relief. 3 days without pain. The old man looked at the spore with a different expression. He asked the price. Daniel said 1 soul stone or an equivalent exchange. The old man said he had no soul stones. He only had a tool. He took a chisel out of his bag, an old one. The blade was worn down almost to the base. The handle was polished to a shine by his palms. Daniel took the chisel. 10 seconds. Card. Hand-forged chisel. About 40 years old. Maker unknown. Blade made of common iron. Spiritual value, 0. Emotional value, average. 20 years of continuous use by a single owner. At auction, it's worth 1 to 3 units, depending on the buyer. Daniel conceded the argument to the old man. He took the chisel. The old man left, satisfied. Penn looked at Daniel in bewilderment. He asked why he wanted an old chisel. Daniel said that the chisel wasn't just a chisel. It was the story of a man who had worked for 20 years without ever resting, and that in one of the auction's worlds, there were collectors who, for such a story, would pay 10 times the value of the item worth 10 times as much. Peng blinked. He didn't understand. Daniel said he would understand later. The second buyer arrived an hour later, a woman in her 30s, tired eyes, hands red from washing clothes. She looked at the stone containing spiritual metal. She asked what it was. Daniel explained. The stone contains micro-inclusions of spiritual iron. If you take it to a good blacksmith in town, he'll smelt a small ingot from the stone. From the ingot, you can make a knife that will stay sharp for 10 years. The woman asked the price. Daniel said 3 soul stones. The woman shook her head. She turned to leave. Daniel asked what she did for a living. The woman stopped. She said she did laundry. For the wealthy households in the village of Qinghe. Daniel asked what she needed most. The woman said soap. Good soap. The kind that doesn't eat away at your hands. Daniel nodded. He said the stone could wait. But if she came to the next fair and brought him something unusual from Qinghe village, anything that seemed strange or old or out of place to her, he would look at it. And if it was valuable, he would trade it for soap. Good soap. The woman looked at him for a long time. She nodded. She left. Peng asked why Daniel was doing this. Why was he letting a customer leave without paying? Daniel said he wasn't letting her go. He was hooking her. At auctions, they call it a funnel. A person who leaves with a promise to return will come back 9 times out of 10. And when they return, they won't come to the counter. They'll come to the man. And people trust the man more than they trust the counter. By noon, Daniel had sold 2 of the 3 spores. For one, he received a chisel. For the other, a bundle of dried herbs that the auction identified as midnight lotus leaves, a rare item. The man who brought them used them to stoke his stove. He didn't know he was holding an ingredient worth 20 soul stones on the open market. Daniel kept the 3rd spore, not for sale, for Grandma May. Her joints ached every morning. 3 days without pain? It's a small thing, but Daniel knew small things are what build trust. And he did something else, too. He walked around the fair. He looked. He listened. He touched things on other people's stalls. He didn't buy anything. He just talked to people, asked what it was, where it came from, how long they'd had it. The farmers eyed him askance. Some answered, some brushed him off. But Daniel wasn't offended. At auctions, the first 100 contacts are always like that. 90 say no. 10 say maybe. 1 says yes. That one is worth all 99. He found his one by evening, a middle-aged woman with a basket of dried herbs. An herbalist from a neighboring village. Not as experienced as Grandma May, but knowledgeable. Daniel sat down next to her. He asked if he could look at the goods. She let him. He sorted through the herbs. Most of it was ordinary. Bitter leaves, dried wormwood, roots used for colds. And one bundle that wasn't what it seemed. The auctioneer identified it as silver wormwood stems, a herb that grew only in places where earth veins once were, where qi flowed. The herb itself had no medicinal properties, but it pointed to something more important. If silver wormwood grows nearby, it means there are still remnants of qi underground. The vein isn't dead at all. It was sleeping. Daniel bought the bundle for the last spore of the 1,000 Dreams mushroom. The herbalist was surprised. She said these stems were worth a handful of copper coins. Why was he paying for them what was worth 3 soul stones? Daniel said it all depended on who needed it. The herbalist shook her head. She left. She decided he was a weirdo. Daniel returned to the village by nightfall. He sat down by Grandmother May's hearth. He placed the bundle of silver wormwood in front of him. He looked at it. He thought, if there is a dormant earth vein beneath the village of Silent Springs, that changes everything. A dormant vein can be awakened. Not him. He is clay. He has no qi. But if he finds the right cultivator, or the right artifact, or the right trade. He looked at Zhang Yanho. He was sitting outside his house across the street, sharpening a sword, slowly, methodically, a whetstone against the blade, over and over. The only person in the village with a spark of talent for cultivation. Disgraced, angry, proud, useless in his own opinion. Daniel stood up. He walked over. He sat down next to him. Jung Yon-ho didn't look up. He kept sharpening. Daniel asked why he had returned from the Silver Crane sect. Jung Yon-ho was silent for a long time, stone against the blade, once, twice, 3 times. Then he said they had expelled him for weakness. His chi was unstable. It would flare up and then die down. The mentor said he was like a candle in the wind. It was a waste of resources. Let him go home. Dig the earth. That's more useful. Daniel nodded. He asked if Jong Yon-ho could sense chi in the ground. Jong Yon-ho looked up. For the first time ever, he looked at Daniel without hostility, with surprise. He said yes. That's the only thing he's good at, sensing where there's chi in the ground and where it's empty. His mentor said it was a useless talent, that a warrior doesn't sniff the ground but cuts down enemies. Daniel smiled. He handed him a bundle of silver wormwood. He asked if he could sense anything. Jung Yun-ho took the stems. He twirled them in his hands. He closed his eyes. Then he opened them, abruptly, wide. He looked at Daniel. He said there was a trace in these stems. Faint, almost dead, but it was there. Where were they from? Daniel said from the surrounding area. He asked if Jung Yun-ho could find the place where they grew. Jung Yun-ho looked at the blue, then at Daniel. He said he could. But why? Daniel replied that if they found the place where they grew, they could find the sleeping earth vein. Jung Yun-ho was silent. Daniel said that the man who would awaken the sleeping vein and restore chi to the earth around the village would not be a candle in the wind. He would be the man who lit a fire where everyone thought there would be no more fire. Jung Yun-ho clenched the stems in his fist. He turned away. Daniel saw his shoulders tremble. He stood up. He walked over to Grandma May. He didn't look back. There's another rule at auctions. When you see that a person is ready to make a decision, walk away. Don't pressure them. Don't rush them. Let them come to yes on their own. In the morning, Jung Yun-ho stood at the threshold of Grandma May's house. With a bundle of silver wormwood in his hand, he said he would go look for it. Daniel nodded. He handed him a flatbread. Jung Yun-ho took it. He looked at it, then at Daniel. For the first time, he almost smiled. Then he turned and walked up the slope, with the quick, light step of a man who, for the first time in a long while, knows where he's going. Daniel stood and watched him go. He drank bitter tea. Grandma May stood nearby. She said he was a dangerous man. Daniel asked why. She said it was because he made people hope, and hope in this world is worse than poison. Those who hope fall harder. Daniel finished his tea. He set down the cup. He said that in that case, he would make sure there was nowhere to fall. Chon Yun-ho returned 2 days later, dirty, scratched up, with a torn sleeve, but his eyes were burning. He had found it. The Earth's lifeline lay beneath the eastern slope of Beishan, an hour and a half's walk from the village. Not deep, 20 meters under a rock. It wasn't dead. It was sleeping. Jong Yun-ho said the chi there was like embers under ash. If you blew on it the right way, it would flare up. Daniel sat on the threshold of Grandma May's house and listened. He asked what it meant to blow on it the right way. Jong Yun-ho sat down beside him. For the first time, he sat beside him instead of standing over him. He explained. To awaken a dormant vein, you need a cultivator no lower than the 3rd level. Jong Yun-ho was at the 1st level, unstable. His chi fluctuated. He could sense the vein, but couldn't reach it. It was like hearing a voice behind a wall, but not having the strength to break through it. Daniel nodded. He asked what a 3rd level cultivator of the 3rd level to agree to help. Jung Yun-ho looked at him as if he were crazy. He said that a third-level cultivator is an inner disciple of a great sect. Such people don't talk to villagers. They fly on swords. They live in floating pavilions. They drink dew from mountain peaks. Why would such a person bother with a forgotten village? Daniel said it was his problem. Jung Yun-ho snorted. Then he asked quietly, "What if his chi became stable? What if he himself reached the third stage? Would he be able to then?" Daniel looked at him. He asked what he needed for that. Jung Yun-ho was silent. Then he said, "A foundation strengthening pill, medium grade. It stabilizes the chi channels. After taking it, a candle in the wind will stop flickering and burn steadily. But a single pill like that costs 200 soul stones." At the auction for low-grade materials, outer disciples from mid-tier sects fight over it. A village boy doesn't stand a chance. Daniel closed his eyes. He entered the auction. A dark plain, flickering dots. He formulated his request. A foundation strengthening pill, middle grade, for Jung Yun-ho from the village of Quiet Springs, so he could stabilize his channels and awaken the earth vein. The auction flickered. The response didn't come immediately. The exchange cost is high. A mid-grade pill is a serious commodity. Daniel must offer something of equal value. He mentally went through his supplies. An old carpenter's chisel, midnight lotus leaves, a petrified spirit beast egg, a fragment of mountain ox bone, twilight pheasant feathers, stones containing spirit metal. Individually, each item was worth less than 200 units, but Daniel knew something the cultivators of this world did not. He knew not a set of things, but a collection, bound by a shared history, united by meaning. A single stamp is worth a penny. A collection of 50 stamps with a common theme is worth 1,000. Because a collection is more than the sum of its parts, he redefined the lot. A collection of 7 items. The lot's title, Voices of the Dying Mountain. The petrified egg of a beast that was never born. The feathers of a bird considered extinct. The bone of a bull that no longer exists. The chisel of a man who carved 20 years of his life away on a tree. The leaves of a lotus used for kindling, unaware of their value. 2 stones containing metal that no one can see. Each item is a voice, the voice of a mountain slowly losing all life. Together, they tell a single story, the story of a place that has been forgotten. For a collector, for a museum, for an archive. For someone who collects not things, but testimonies. The auction flashed brighter. A buyer was found. A keeper from the world of the infinite library. A world where they collect not artifacts, but stories. Every collection with a story becomes a book on a shelf. 7 items, 7 voices, 1 story. The keeper was ready to pay. A foundation strengthening pill, middle grade, plus a bonus. A small scroll with meditation techniques for unstable channels. Lowest rank, but better than nothing. Daniel agreed. The exchange took place. He opened his eyes. On his lap lay a pill the size of a pinky fingernail, golden, with fine veins inside, and a scroll rolled into a tube. Jung Yun-ho sat nearby, watching. Daniel held out the pill to him. Jung Yun-ho didn't take it. He moved away, asked what it was for. Daniel said it was for nothing, for the vein, for the village, for the people who live here. Jung Yun-ho said he didn't deserve it, that he'd been kicked out of the sect like a dog, that he was weak, that the pill was worth a fortune, and wasting it on a candle in the wind was madness. Daniel placed the pill on the ground between them. He placed the scroll next to it. He said one thing. You weren't kicked out because you're weak. You were kicked out because they didn't know what to do with you. But I do. Jung Yun-ho stared at the pill for a long time. His hands clenched into fists. Then he unclenched them. He picked it up, swallowed it, closed his eyes. Daniel saw a tremor run through his body, small, quick, like ripples on water. Then Jung Yun-ho's face smoothed out. He opened his eyes. They were different. Not angry, not confused. Clear. He said that his chi had settled. For the first time in his entire life. It wasn't racing. It wasn't jumping. It was burning. Steady and quiet, like a candle in a windowless room. Daniel smiled. He said that a candle in a windowless room was exactly what was needed to light a fire underground. Jung Yun-ho stood up. He bowed, deeply, by the book, just as a student bows to a mentor. Daniel said there was no need, that he wasn't a mentor, that he simply sees things. Jung Yun-ho straightened up. He said that was exactly why. Because Daniel sees what others don't, including what's inside him. For the next 3 days, Jung Yun-ho meditated. He sat on the edge of the village, facing the mountain. He didn't move. He didn't eat. He drank only the water that Grandma May brought him. The scroll with the meditation technique lay open before him. Daniel didn't interfere. He was busy with other matters. He sent Pan and 2 teenagers up the mountain on a new mission, to look not only for valuable items, but also for traces. Traces of people, old trails, abandoned campsites, remains of buildings. Peng asked why. Daniel said that if people had lived on the mountain, people had lived there, they would have left things behind. And old things are worth more than new ones. Pan left. Grandma May sat on the doorstep and rolled balls of rice flour. Her granddaughter was helping, or rather getting in the way. But Grandma May didn't scold her. She had stopped scolding altogether after her granddaughter recovered. Daniel sat down next to her. He helped shape the dough. His hands remembered. His grandmother in Seattle used to make mandu on the weekends. The same motions. Press, turn, pinch. Grandma May looked at his hands. She said he was shaping them like someone who had done this before. Daniel said he had, a long time ago, somewhere else. Grandma May didn't ask where. She didn't ask questions about his past. Maybe because she knew she wouldn't like the answers. Maybe because she didn't care. The main thing was that he was here, that he had helped, that her granddaughter was alive. The rest could be left at the door. By evening on the 3rd day, Jung Yun-ho got up. He came to Daniel. He said he was ready. His chi was stable. He could sense the earth better than before. Much better. The pill hadn't just stabilized his meridians. It had expanded his perception. Before, he could sense chi in the ground within 5 steps of him. Now, within 50. He can feel the vein. He can try to awaken it, but he's not sure he has enough strength. The 3rd stage is far away. He's at the 1st. Stable now, but the 1st. Daniel asked if he could help. Jung Yun-ho asked how. Daniel said he didn't know yet, but he knew one thing. One person is one candle, but if you gather 10 candles in one place, there will be enough light. Jung Yun-ho didn't understand. Daniel said he'd think about it until morning. That night, Daniel lay there staring at the ceiling. He was thinking. He needed a 3rd stage cultivator, or a way to temporarily strengthen Jung Yun-ho, or another path to the vein. At auctions, when you don't have the budget for the main lot, you don't walk away. You look for a workaround. You buy 3 small lots that together add up to the same as one large one. In the morning, he woke up with an idea. He went out into the courtyard. He found Jung Yun-ho. He asked if the man could channel someone else's chi, not his own. Jung Yun-ho thought for a moment. He said that in theory, yes. If someone gave him their chi, he could channel it into the ground, like a conduit. But who would give it? There were no cultivators in the village besides him. Daniel said there were no cultivators. But chi exists in every living thing, even in clay. It's just that clay doesn't know how to control it. But if the chi were extracted... Grandma May approached. She listened. She said that in the old days, the villagers would gather in a circle and sing, and that after they sang, the earth yielded a better harvest. The old folks said it was superstition, but Grandma May remembered. When she was little and the village sang, the fields were green. Daniel looked at her, then at Jun Ho, then at the village. 20 households, 70 people, each of them clay. Each carries a tiny spark of chi within them, uncontrollable, useless by the sex standards. But if you gather 70 sparks and channel them through a single conduit, Daniel closed his eyes, entered the auction, formulated a query not for an object, but for information. Does a technique or ritual exist that allows a group of people without cultivation skills to combine their chi and transmit it to a single conduit? The auction replied, it exists. The ritual of the common hearth, an ancient practice of the Heshan civilization, lost 3,000 years ago. The cost of the information is one item related to communal labor. Daniel opened his eyes. He stood up. He walked to the well in the center of the village. He placed his hand on the stone rim. 10 seconds. Card. Well. Approximately 120 years old. Dug by the joint efforts of the residents of the village of Silent Springs. The stones were laid by hand. Each stone bears the marks of dozens of hands. High emotional value, unique symbolic value. Daniel chipped off a small piece from the edge of the well, the size of a fingernail. He logged into the auction. He listed it. A fragment of the well that had provided water to an entire village for 120 years, dug up by their collective hands, for the village of Quiet Springs, so they could do something together again. The exchange took place. In his palm lay a thin wooden plaque with symbols burned into it, instructions for the ritual of the common hearth. Daniel read it again, smiled. Simple. Surprisingly simple. People stand in a circle. They join hands. One of them is the conductor. He stands in the center. The rest breathe in unison. They sing. Any song. The main thing is together. Chi merges, flows toward the center. The guide directs it into the ground. No third stage is needed. All that's needed is the first stage and 70 people who are ready to breathe together. Convincing 70 people to stand in a circle and sing turned out to be more difficult than deceiving the punitive squad of the great sect. Daniel started with the village elder. Yun Bohai listened. He shook his head. He said the people wouldn't go. Not because they don't want to, because they're afraid. Anything related to Qi is the sect's business. If the sect finds out that the villagers are trying to work with Qi without permission, they'll be wiped out faster than for debts. Daniel said this isn't cultivation. It's singing. Yun Bohai said the sects don't see the difference. Daniel said the cults wouldn't find out because the sleeping one lived underground, an open-air ritual. No flashes of light, no energy pillars, just people standing in a field and singing. Yun Bohai was silent for a long time. Then he said he'd talk to the people, but he didn't promise anything. Daniel nodded. He went to Grandma May, sat down next to her, asked what songs they sang in the village. Grandma May looked at him. Her eyes grew soft, distant. She said they used to sing a lot. The song of the first rain, the song of the autumn bonfire, the song of the long night. They don't sing now. They haven't sung in a long time. Why sing if there's no one to sing to? The young ones have left. The old ones are tired. The children don't know the words. Daniel asked if she remembered the words. Grandma May snorted. She said she remembers everything. She remembers how her mother sang by the well, how her father sang in the field, how her husband sang to her when they were young. Memory doesn't fade. It just stays silent when there's no one to listen. Daniel said there was someone now. It took 2 days of persuading her. Daniel didn't pressure her. He walked around the yards. He talked. Not about the song, not about the vein, about other things. He asked who was sick with what, whose things were broken, who needed what. For the old man with bad knees, he got some ointment through the auction. He traded a pebble of spiritual metal for a jar of pain-relieving balm from a world where herbalism is more advanced than here. For the woman whose roof was leaking, he didn't fix anything. He just told Pen and the teenagers. They climbed up and fixed it. With their hands, without chi. No auction, just 3 boys with a hammer and a bundle of straw. He couldn't help the child who hadn't spoken since birth. The auction assessed the problem as damage to the vocal cords. The treatment cost more than everything Daniel had earned in 2 weeks. But he sat down with the child, in silence. He drew with a stick on the ground, circles, squares, flowers. The child watched. Then he took the stick and drew his own flower, crooked, with 7 petals. The child's mother stood in the doorway, crying. Daniel didn't promise anything, but people saw. He walks, he listens, he helps however he can, and he asks for nothing in return. Or rather, he does ask, one thing, to come to the field behind the village in the evening and stand in a circle. On the 3rd evening they came. Not everyone, 43 people out of 70. The rest watched from afar, from windows, from behind fences. They were afraid. But they were curious. Jong Yun-ho stood in the center, barefoot, wearing only a shirt. His face was calm. 43 people stood around him. Grandma May was the first to stand, her granddaughter behind her. Behind her, Yoon Bo-hai. Behind him, Peng and the teenagers. Then the rest. Old people, women, children. Some held hands tightly, others barely touched their neighbors' fingers. Grandma May began to sing, softly, the song of the first rain. A simple melody, 3 notes up, 2 down, 3 up again, like rain on a roof. Drip, drip, drip. Silence. Drip, drip, drip. Daniel stood to the side, watching. He couldn't join the circle. He was the auctioneer, not a participant. His job was to arrange the lots. The buyers would do the rest. At first, nothing happened. People sang, hesitantly, out of tune. Some forgot the words. Some lost the rhythm. Grandma May sang steadily, like a beacon. The others followed her lead. After a minute, the voices began to blend. Not all at once, one by one, like streams finding a common channel. Jong Yun-ho stood in the center with his eyes closed. Daniel saw his hands begin to tremble, slightly, quickly. Then the trembling subsided. His face relaxed. He exhaled. He slowly crouched down. He placed his palms on the ground. The singing continued. Grandma May led the way. The voices grew stronger. The children picked up the melody. They didn't know the words, but they caught the tune. 3 notes up, 2 down. Simple, like breathing. Daniel didn't feel the chi. He was clay. But he saw something else. He saw people standing together. For the first time in years, he saw the old woman singing, tears streaming down her face. He saw the boy, Peng, squeezing his neighbor's hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He saw Yoon Bo-hai singing with his eyes closed, his lips trembling. It wasn't magic. It was something older than magic. Jong Yun-ho opened his eyes, abruptly. He said one word, there. The earth beneath his palms cracked. Not wide, a thin crack. Steam rose from it, warm, smelling of earth and something sweet, like honey, like spring. The people fell silent. They watched. The crack widened. A greenish light stretched out from it, dim, barely noticeable, but it was there. Jong Yun-ho pressed his palms deeper, his face tense. The veins in his neck bulged. He directed his chi downward. 43 sparks merged into one, threw himself into the ground. The light in the crack flickered. Then it became steadier, brighter. The greenish glow spread across the ground like water. It flowed from the crack in all directions, slowly, beneath the earth. People felt warmth beneath their feet. A woman gasped. A child laughed. An old man took a step back, then returned. The glow reached the edge of the field and stopped. Jung Yun-ho put his hands together, fell onto his back. He was breathing heavily. Sweat was pouring off him, but he was smiling. For the first time in all the time Daniel had known him, he was truly smiling. Daniel walked over, sat down beside him, asked if it had worked. Jung Yun-ho said that the spirit had awakened. Not completely, maybe a quarter of the way, but she had woken up. Qi was flowing, slowly, in a thin stream, but it was flowing. In a month, the field would begin to yield crops. In 3 months, the spiritual herbs on the hillside would start to grow faster. In 6 months, the village would stand on living earth. Daniel nodded. He looked at the people. They were standing in the field. They were looking at the greenish light that was slowly fading into the earth. They were silent. Then Grandmother May did something she hadn't done in many years. She began to sing again. Not the song of the first rain, another one, the song of the autumn bonfire. Slow, warm, like embers. And one by one, voices joined in. Not for the ritual, just because. Because they wanted to sing. Daniel sat next to Jung Yun-ho on the warm ground and listened. For the first time in all his time in this world, he thought that maybe this wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was a gift. The next morning, the village was different. Not on the outside. The houses were the same. The roofs were the same. The chickens were the same. But the people walked differently. More upright, faster. They spoke louder. 3 old men who hadn't left their houses in weeks came out into the yard. They sat on a bench by the well. They sat and talked. It didn't matter what about. What mattered was that they were sitting together. Daniel watched. He counted. That was a habit too. Counting not just things, but people, their moods, their movements. At auctions, it's called reading the room. When the room comes alive, the bidding goes up. The village had come alive. It was time to raise the stakes. A month had passed. The field had turned green. The white millet had grown 3 handspans tall. The stalks were sturdy. The leaves were broad. The grain was gaining weight. Grandma May walked along the rows every morning. She touched the stalks. She sniffed the earth. She said the earth smelled different, more alive, like before. Like in her childhood. The village was bustling. Peng and the teenagers went up the mountain every day and returned with sacks. Daniel sorted through them. He assessed them. He set aside the valuable items. The stockpile grew. Mushroom spores, stones with metal, herbs, bones, feathers. Once, Peng brought a clay shard, small, dirty, with chipped edges. Daniel took it in his hands. 10 seconds. The card turned over and he froze. A shard from a ritual bowl of the Heshan civilization. Approximately 3,000 years old. High spiritual value. Unique historical value. Item not subject to exchange. The reason is directly related to the auction. Daniel turned the shard over. On the inside was a symbol. A circle with 2 dots inside. The same symbol that had flashed at the edges of the auction space when he closed his eyes. The symbol of the civilization that had created his gift. He tucked the shard into his shirt. Penn said it was just an old pot, nothing of value. Penn believed him. Daniel didn't believe himself. 3,000 years. The Heshan civilization. People who didn't fight for the sea, but traded it. They lived here. On this mountain. The ritual of the common hearth was their practice. The lifeblood of the earth they had awakened was their lifeblood. The village of Quiet Springs stood on the ruins of a world that knew how to live differently. Daniel buried that thought deep inside. It was too early. For now, he had to work. The fair at the foot of the mountain was now held every 10 days, and each time Daniel stood there with his mat, the merchandise changed. He wasn't selling raw materials, he was selling a service, an appraisal. Peasants from the surrounding villages began bringing him things. Old things, mysterious things, things found in the fields, things passed down from great-grandfathers. Daniel took each item in his hands, 10 seconds, and he would say what it was. Most of it was junk, but sometimes. An old man from the village beyond the pass brought a rusty spearhead. He thought it was just a piece of scrap metal. Daniel appraised it. A spearhead made of spiritual bronze, an alloy forgotten 200 years ago. If remelted, it could make 3 good knives for cutting spiritual herbs. The old man received the tip 10 soul stones from a traveling merchant, to whom Daniel resold it, minus 2 soul stones as commission for Daniel. The old man left with tears in his eyes. 10 soul stones. He hadn't held that much in his hands in his entire life. The rumor spread, slowly, like smoke from a fire. In the around Beishan, people began talking about the merchant, about the guy from Quiet Springs who looks at junk and finds gold in it. Some said he was a charlatan. Some said he was a saint. Some said he was a demon in human form. Daniel didn't care. Something else mattered. People were coming. To the fair. To him. The stream grew. In a month, more than 200 items passed through his hands. 19 of them turned out to be valuable. The total value was about 120 soul stones. Of those, Daniel took a commission of 12. The rest went to the owners. 12 soul stones. For the sect, it was pocket change. For the village of Quiet Springs, it was more than they had earned in the previous 3 years. Daniel sat by the hearth that evening and counted. He needed to open a real shop, not a mat by the roadside, a permanent place, with a roof, with shelves, with a sign. For that, he needed a town. The village of Qinghe was the closest, half a day's journey south. Grandma May had told him about it. 3,000 residents, a market, a pharmacy, a blacksmith shop, a tavern, a small Red Phoenix sect office for collecting taxes. Daniel decided to go. He told the village elder. Yongbo-hai shook his head. He said Qinghe was dangerous. Sect members were everywhere. If anyone recognizes him and connects him to the letter from the Lotus Abode, there will be questions. Daniel said that questions are good. Questions mean interest. Interest means customers. He left the next morning with a small bag. In the bag were 6 valuable items for sale and a shard of Heshan tucked under his arm. Jung Yun-ho volunteered to go with him. Daniel agreed. It's safer together. The path led down the mountain through a sparse forest. The trees were ordinary, not spiritual, just pines and birches. The trail was narrow but well-trodden. People walked there. Jung Yun-ho walked ahead. His hand was on his sword. His eyes were sharp. He scanned the surroundings. Ever since his chi had stabilized, he had become a different person. Not just physically. His back was straight. His stride was confident. His jaw wasn't clenched in constant tension. He had even started talking more. He told Daniel about the Silver Crane sect, a small sect, 300 disciples, 1 elder, a tiny territory, between the Scarlet Phoenix and the Azure Lotus Abode, like a mouse between 2 cats. They took him there because the intake that year was poor. They took anyone they could get. He trained for 2 years. Sword fighting techniques, meditation, chi control. Everything came hard to him. His chi fluctuated wildly. His mentor scolded him. The other students laughed. They called him the Flickering One. Then came the evaluation. The elder personally examined each student. Jung Yun-ho demonstrated everything he knew. The elder shook his head. He said there was talent, but it was twisted, like a tree that grew beneath a rock. It could be straightened, but it would be costly. The sect's resources wouldn't be enough. Let him go. Jung Yun-ho fell silent. They walked in silence. Then he asked quietly, why had Daniel spent a pill worth 200 soul stones on him? He could have spent it on anything. On food, on protection, on himself. Why on him? Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought. Then he said, because you're the only one in the village who can do what no one else can. Feel the earth. It's not a weakness. It's a specialty. The world says that what everyone wants is valuable. Swords, fire, flight. But I'm a merchant. I know that the most valuable thing is the one that no one else has. Your talent is rare. You just happen to find the wrong buyer. Jung Yun-ho turned away. Daniel saw that he swallowed hard. He didn't say anything else. At auctions, the silence that follows the right words is worth more than any speech. By noon, they had reached Qinghe. The village was larger than Daniel had expected. Not 3,000 residents, maybe 5,000. Grandma May hadn't been here in a long time. Apparently, the village had grown. Stone houses, tile roofs, a wide main street, shops on both sides, fabrics, food, tools, a single pharmacy with a green sign, a single blacksmith shop from which heat and the clang of metal emanated, a tavern on the corner with the smell of roasted meat, and at the end of the street, a larger building with a red flag, with the phoenix crest, the office of the Scarlet Phoenix sect. Daniel looked at the office, turned away, walked down the street, looked around, counted. For every 10 shops, one was empty, so business was dying. The ones that were open sold cheap goods, turnips, rice, coarse canvas. No spiritual goods, no pills, no herbs, no artifacts. The sect takes it all. What the cult doesn't take is taken by traveling merchants who arrive once a month with a caravan from the city of Yuncheng. They buy for pennies. They sell in the city for full price. A classic scheme. Daniel had seen this in his past life. Small towns from which big dealers siphon off antiques for a pittance because the locals don't know the real prices. Then they sell them at auctions in New York for 10 times the price. It's the same here, only instead of antiques, it's spiritual resources, and instead of New York auctions, the floating cities of the great sects. Daniel found an empty shop on a side street, a small one. One room, a counter, shelves. The roof doesn't leak. The floor is dirt but even. The landlord lives next door, an old man with a cataract in his eye. He said the shop had been empty for 6 months. The previous tenant ran off without paying. The rent was 2 soul stones a month. Daniel said 1. The old man said 1.5. Daniel said 1, and he'd fixed the shutter that was hanging by a single hinge. The old man looked at the shutter, then at Daniel. He agreed. Daniel paid 2 months in advance, 2 soul stones, out of the 12 he'd earned. 10 left. He stood in the empty shop. Dust, cobwebs, the smell of dampness. Jun Yun-ho stood nearby. He asked what to do next. Daniel ran his finger along the counter, left a streak in the dust, smiled, said, Han's shop, opening in 3 days. For 3 days, Daniel prepared the shop. Jung Yun-ho repaired the shutter, then the door, then the roof support that was barely holding on. Daniel swept the floor, wiped down the shelves, arranged the merchandise. 6 items. 3 spores of the 1,000 Dreams mushroom. 2 stones with spiritual metal. 1 root of the grass of dawn, properly dried and processed according to the instructions Daniel had traded for a fragment of mountain ox bone at the auction. Not much, but Daniel knew that a display case isn't a warehouse. A display case is an invitation. At auctions, the best lots aren't put out all at once. They put out 3. People look, they come, they ask, and then you pull out the 4th one. From under the counter, as if reluctantly. That 4th one always sells for more. He made the sign himself. A board from an old fence, burned in letters. Han's shop. Appraisal, exchange, consultation. Jung Yun-ho hung the board above the door. He stepped back. He looked at it. He said it looked cheap. Daniel said that cheap was a strategy. A fancy sign attracts the attention of cults. A shabby sign attracts customers who are looking for practicality, not glamour. The morning of the first day, the shop was open. Daniel stood behind the counter. Jung Yun-ho sat by the door with a sword, just in case. No one came in for the first 2 hours. That's normal. Daniel waited. The first to enter was a boy of about 10, barefoot, dirty. He peeped inside. He saw stones on the shelves. He said it was rubbish and that he'd seen prettier stones. He ran off. The second to enter was a middle-aged man, dressed better than a peasant, a clean robe, a belt with a brass buckle. He looked at the merchandise. He asked what kind of shop this was. Daniel explained. Appraisal of items. If you have something and you don't know what it is or how much it's worth, bring it in. 10 seconds and I'll tell you. The man grunted. He asked how much the appraisal cost. Daniel said it was free. If the item is valuable and you want to sell it through me, I take a 10% commission. The man pulled a coin out of his pocket. An old one, tarnished. He said he'd found it in the garden. He thought it was copper, but he hadn't cleaned it, just in case. Daniel took the coin. 10 seconds. The card. A coin from the Six Pillars era, 400 years old. An alloy of copper and spiritual silver. Minimal spiritual value. High numismatic value. At the right auction, 5 to 8 soul stones. Daniel placed the coin on the counter. He said it wasn't copper. It was a 400-year-old coin made of an alloy with spiritual silver, worth at least 5 of the soul. The man stared at the coin, then at Daniel, then back at the coin. He asked how Daniel knew. Daniel said it was his job. The man was silent. Then he asked if Daniel could sell it. Daniel said he could. If the man left the coin with him for 3 days, he would find a buyer. 10% commission. The man agreed. He left. An hour later, he returned with a friend. The friend brought an old knife, not valuable, ordinary iron. Daniel told him honestly, just a knife, good quality, but of no particular value. The friend wasn't upset. He asked if he could bring more. Daniel said he should bring them. By the end of the first day, 11 people had visited the shop. 3 of them brought items for appraisal. 1 turned out to be valuable. An old box, wooden, carved, inside a false bottom. Beneath it, an empty space saturated with residual chi. The auctioneer identified the box as a pill container, handmade, about 120 years old. Old-school apothecaries used these. It was worth 10 to 15 soul stones. The woman who brought the box nearly fainted. She said she'd wanted to throw it away. Her grandfather had left it behind. She thought it was just a box. Daniel said it wasn't just that her grandfather had been an apothecary. The woman nodded. Yes, he was. A long time ago. The sect shut down the apothecary. Her grandfather was gone. Only junk remained. Daniel said it wasn't junk. It was a legacy. The woman began to cry. She left the box for sale. 3 days later, Daniel sold the coin and the box. He sold the coin through the auction. He traded it for a set of 5 basic alchemical tools. The set cost exactly 5 soul stones at the local market. He sold the set to a traveling merchant for 5 stones. He gave the man 4.5. He kept half a stone as commission. He sold the box differently, not through the auction, through a contact. At the fair, he met a traveling merchant named Gu Wei Lin. Fat, cunning, always sweaty, but honest as a traveling merchant can be. Gu Wei Lin bought rarities and took them to Yun Cheng. Daniel offered him the box. Described it. A pill container. Handmade. 120 years old. Old-style apothecary school. Gu Lin examined it, nodded, offered 7 soul stones. Daniel said 12. Gu Weilin said 9. Daniel said 11, and he would tell Gu Weilin about 3 villages where the peasants sit on treasures and don't know it. Gu Weilin was sweating. He thought. He agreed to 10 plus the information. Daniel took 10. He gave 9 to the woman, 1 for himself. He gave honest information, 3 villages, real finds. Gu Weilin left satisfied. He'll be back. Daniel knew that. At auctions, the best customer isn't the one who paid the most. It's the one who came back. The shop's second week. The flow was growing. 5 people a day. Then 7. Then 10. Not everyone brought in valuables, but everyone left with an answer. Daniel appraised honestly. He called junk, junk. Valuables, valuables. He didn't inflate prices to please them. He didn't undervalue items to buy cheaply. People sensed this. In a world where every merchant tries to cheat, a man who speaks the truth seems like a miracle. By the end of the second week, what Daniel had both hoped for and feared happened. A man in a red robe entered the shop. Not a warrior's robe, a bureaucrat's, with the phoenix emblem on his chest. Young, about 20, thin, nervous. A tax collector, lowest rank, an outer disciple of the Red Phoenix sect. He surveyed the shop, looked at the merchandise, at Daniel, at Jung Yun Ho by the door. He asked who had opened the shop. Daniel said it was him. He asked if there was permission from the sect. Daniel said the shop was located within the territory of the Chonghae General Market. The General Market does not require permission from the sect, only payment of the trade tax, 1 soul stone per quarter. He had already paid the village headman. The collector frowned. He looked at the goods. He took a mushroom spore from the shelf. He turned it over. He put it back. He asked where the goods came from. Daniel said they were from Mount Beishan and the surrounding villages. Purchased from the locals, appraised, resold. The collector nodded. He said that the sect monitors the trade in spiritual materials. If items above the 3rd rank appear, Daniel is required to report them to the office. Otherwise, there will be trouble. Daniel said, of course. The collector left. John Yun Ho exhaled. Daniel did too. Then he smiled. The collector had come. He'd looked. He hadn't shut down the shop. He hadn't confiscated the goods. He hadn't arrested him. So the shop was legal. So Daniel existed within this system. No longer a ghost. No longer a village scavenger. A merchant. With a shop. With a counter. With a sign. Small, poor, but real. That evening, Daniel sat alone in the shop. John Yun Ho had gone back to the village. Someone has to keep watch. Help Grandma May. Keep an eye on the teenagers. Daniel stayed. He lit the oil lamp, sat down behind the counter, took out the Haesang shard, placed it in front of him, looked at it. A circle with 2 dots, the symbol of exchange, a symbol of balance. He ran his finger along the lines. 10 seconds. The card flipped over. New information. Information that wasn't there before. The shard has been activated by proximity to the awakened Earth vein. Expanded history available. Previous auction bearer. Name lost. Male. Age at the time of death approximately 30. Occupation. Traveling merchant. Killed 300 years ago. Place of death unknown. Cause of death. Conflict with the leader of one of the 9 sects. No details found. Daniel put the shard back in his pocket. 300 years ago. A traveling merchant. Killed by the head of a sect. And after that, the world began to die. The Earth's veins began to dry up. Chi was dwindling. Because there was no one left to trade. No one left to redistribute. The auction lost its vessel and fell silent for 3 centuries. Until it found Daniel in Seattle. He lay down on the shop floor. He closed his eyes. The oil lamp smoldered. Somewhere beyond the wall, people were laughing. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary town, Daniel thought. In a year, the letter of patronage would expire. By then, he needed to become useful enough that destroying him would cost more than keeping him. He needed Yuncheng. A big city, big money, big opportunities, and big enemies. Ho Ji Min had memorized his face. This was no empty threat. The golden fan was not one to forget. Daniel rolled onto his side. Tomorrow. Everything tomorrow. Today, he was a merchant with a stall, and that was enough for now. 6 weeks in Qinghe. Khan's stall was open every day except market days, when Daniel set up a mat by the mountain. 2 counters, 2 streams of customers. Money was coming in, slowly, but it was coming in. His stock of soulstones had grown to 30. Daniel spent nothing on himself. He ate the flatbreads that Grandma May sent through Pan. He slept on the shop floor. His clothes were the same, a patched-up robe, bandages on his legs. Chon Yon-ho said he looked like a beggar. Daniel said that a beggar who is trusted is better than a rich man who is feared. At the beginning of the 7th week, a girl entered the shop. Daniel looked up from the counter, and the first thing he noticed was a sword. Not at her waist, on her back, long, in a worn scabbard. The hilt was wrapped in cloth that had once been white, but had now turned gray from sweat and dust. The girl was thin, of average height, hair tied back in a ponytail, a weathered face, tanned, a scar on her right cheekbone. Thin, old, travel clothes, dusty, mended, 2 knives and a purse on her belt. The purse was thin. Her eyes were gray, cold, alert. They scanned the shop in a second, every corner, every shelf, every exit. The eyes of a person accustomed to assessing a room for hiding spots and potential attack vectors. She walked up to the counter, looked at the merchandise, then at Daniel. She asked if he was appraising the weapons. Daniel said he appraised everything. She paused. Then she reached behind her back. She pulled a sword from its sheath. A fragment, half a blade. The edge was severed in the middle. The cut was jagged, not broken in battle, chopped off on purpose, by someone very strong, with a single blow. She placed a fragment on the counter, gently, like putting a child in a crib. Daniel looked at the fragment, then at the girl, then back at the fragment. He picked it up. 10 seconds. The card unfolded. Daniel read it and felt a chill run down his spine. The blade of the White Crane. A paired family sword of the So clan, forged 140 years ago by Master So Min-jun. High spiritual value. Combat value in current condition, 0. Emotional value, critical. An oath is bound to the item, an oath of protection, uttered by the sword's last owner, So-hyun, 23 years ago, at the moment of his death. The oath remains unfulfilled. Item status, relic. Restriction, cannot be traded, only converted. Daniel placed the shard on the counter. Slowly, carefully, he looked at the girl. She stood there waiting. Her face was still, but her hands were trembling slightly. Daniel said, "This isn't just a broken sword." The girl said she knew. Daniel said, "An oath is bound to it, an unfinished one." The girl turned pale. He asked who So-hyun was. The girl was silent for a long time. Then she said, "My father." Daniel nodded. He asked her name. So-yuna. Daniel asked how long she'd been carrying the shard with her. So-yuna said 7 years, ever since the day she took it from the field where her father died. She was 17. Daniel asked why she'd come here. So-yuna said she'd heard about a merchant in Qinghe who could see things. She'd gone to 6 blacksmiths. None of them would take it. They said the shard was cursed, that the dead man's curse poisoned the metal, that it needed to be melted down and forgotten. She can't remelt it, can't forget it, can't throw it away. She's carried it for 7 years. It cuts her hands, not with the blade, with memories. Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. At auctions, there's a special category of clients. People who bring an item not to sell it, but so that someone will finally tell them what it means. They don't need money. They need recognition. Recognition that their pain is real and that the item they hold in their hands has meaning. Daniel said, "I can't repair this sword." So Yoon nodded. She knew. Daniel said, "But I can transform it." So Yuna looked up. Daniel explained, "The auction house can't trade a relic with an unfulfilled oath, but it can change its form. The sword will remain a sword in essence, but it will change its appearance. The oath will remain, but it will stop cutting." So Yuna asked how. Daniel said he needed time, a day, maybe 2. He had to find the right buyer. Not someone who would buy a fragment, but someone who would exchange a service. A master from another world who knew how to work with oaths. So Yuna asked how much it would cost. Daniel looked at her. He said nothing. So Yuna frowned. She asked why. Daniel said because it wasn't a commercial order. It was a return. The object was returning to its purpose. He wouldn't charge for it. So Yuna looked at him for a long time. Then she sat down on the floor by the counter. She crossed her legs. She placed her hands on her knees. She said she would wait. Daniel closed his eyes. He entered the auction, a dark plane, flickering dots. He wasn't looking for a buyer. He was looking for a master, a blacksmith, from a world where oaths are not curses, but material, where a promise made to the dying can be remelted rather than broken, just as metal is remelted. He found one, a master from the world of 1,000 hammers, a world where every blacksmith is a healer. They don't forge swords, they forge answers. You bring in what's broken, you take away what's whole. Not the same thing, something else, but the right one. Daniel formulated his request, a shard of a sword with an unfinished oath. The form must be transformed, the oath preserved, the pain removed. For So Yuna of the So clan, so she could carry the memory of her father without hurting herself. The master replied, "The cost. An object is needed into which the unfinished work of a chelth. Any master, from any world, incompletion for incompletion, balance." Daniel thought, unfinished work. He remembered the drafts. No, he doesn't know Li Xiaomei yet. It's too soon. What does he have? He opened his eyes, looked at his hands, the hands of a merchandiser. For 12 years, he had written lot descriptions, thousands of descriptions, each a small work of art. And there was one he hadn't finished, the last one. That morning in Seattle, he sat at the computer and wrote a description of a gray cup from a box at a flea market. He didn't finish it. He left the house. He slipped. He died. An unfinished description. The last work of a master appraiser from another world. He closed his eyes. He stepped back inside. He formulated it. The unfinished description of the final lot, composed by merchandiser Daniel Kahn of Seattle, minutes before his death. Lot number 117,241, a gray unsigned cup. The description trails off mid-sentence. The auction accepted it. The exchange took place, but not instantly. The auction said, "The transformation will take 1 night. The results will be ready in the morning." Daniel opened his eyes. So Yoon was sitting on the floor. She didn't move. She looked at him. He said it would be ready in the morning. She nodded. She remained seated. Daniel lay down in his spot behind the counter. So Yuna sat by the door. She wasn't sleeping. She was keeping watch, as if that was all she'd ever done in her life. Morning. Daniel woke up. An object lay on the counter. Not a shard, a hairpin. Long, thin, made of the same metal as the blade, the same color, the same pattern on the surface. But the shape was different. Not a blade, a needle, with a small finial shaped like a crane's wing. Daniel picked up the hairpin. 10 seconds. A card. White crane hairpin. Transformed from a fragment of the So clan's family sword. The oath is preserved. The form has been altered. Combat value is low. Can be used as a hidden weapon of last resort. High spiritual value. The oath of protection is active. The owner of the hairpin is under the protection of So Hyun's oath. Infinite emotional value. Daniel placed the hairpin on the counter. So Yoon stood up. She approached. She saw it. She picked it up. Her hands didn't tremble. She looked at the crane's wing on the finial, then she slowly raised her hands. She pulled out the old wooden stick she'd been using to hold her hair. Her hair fell onto her shoulders. She inserted the hairpin. Slowly, like inserting a key into a lock. Her hair rose. The hairpin glinted. And So Yoon began to cry. Silently. Tears streamed down her tanned cheeks, over the scar, down her chin. She stood there and cried, not wiping her face. 7 years. For 7 years, she had worn a shard that cut into her hands. Now it lay in her hair and no longer cut. Her father was still with her. The oath was still alive. But it no longer hurt. Daniel turned away. He wiped down the counter. He gave her time. When he turned back, So Yuna was standing upright. Her eyes were red. Her face was calm. She asked how she could pay. Daniel said he'd already told her. Nothing. So Yuna shook her head. She said a debt is a debt. She's a mercenary. She knows how to do one thing. Fight. If he ever needs a sword, he knows where to look. Daniel said he'd remember. So Yuna turned toward the door. She stopped. She asked without looking back. How did he know about the oath? None of the 6 blacksmiths had seen it. Daniel answered quietly. Because I'm not a blacksmith. I'm a merchant. A blacksmith sees metal. I see history. So Yuna left. Daniel stood behind the counter. He looked at the closed door. Then he smiled. The first sword in his collection, not on a shelf, in the hair of a girl who hadn't been able to let go of her father for 7 years. The auction flickered in his mind, warmth, like approval. 2 months after the opening of Khan's shop in Qinghe, Daniel Neal sat behind the counter and counted. 47 soulstones, 11 regular customers, 3 villages that regularly brought items in for appraisal. 1 traveling merchant, Gu Wei Lin, who came once every 2 weeks and bought up everything Daniel had set aside for resale in Yuncheng. The flow was growing, but Daniel knew that Qinghe was the ceiling. A small settlement, few people, little money, few opportunities. He needed Yuncheng, a major trading city, the commercial capital of the eastern coast of Juhua. Gu Wei Lin would talk about it in the evenings over tea. 100,000 residents, 12 markets, 4 auction houses, 3 sects have official representatives there, pharmacies, forges, craft schools, and most importantly, the 8 Winds auction, the continent's largest trading venue, held once a year. It brings together the elders of all 9 sects. Fates are decided there. Fortunes are made there. There, in a single evening, you can go from being a nobody to someone whose name is spoken in whispers. Daniel decided to go, but not alone. In the morning, he closed the shop. He hung up a sign. Back in 10 days. He went to the village of Quiet Springs. Grandma May greeted him with flatbreads, hot ones. Her granddaughter ran to meet him and clung to his leg. In 2 months, the girl had grown stronger. Her cheeks were round. Her eyes sparkled. She ran around the village like a wind-up toy. The village had changed. The white millet field rose waist-high. The grains were heavy. 2 weeks until harvest. The mountainside had been combed through by teenagers, crisscrossing it. Peng had become the senior harvester. He now had 2 assistants from the neighboring village. They walked together. They brought sacks. Daniel assesses the situation once a week when he visits. Chon Yun-ho meditated every day. The chi is stable. He felt the vein beneath the village like his own pulse. The vein was awakening, slowly but surely. The land around the village had changed. The grass was greener. The trees were taller. Even the chickens had stopped being mean. They had gained weight. They were laying eggs. A small miracle. Quiet. Invisible to the world. But for the 20 households, it was like dawn after an endless night. Daniel gathered everyone in the evening around Grandma May's hearth. Chung Yun-ho, Peng, Yunbo Hai, Grandma May. He said he was leaving for Yuncheng on a reconnaissance mission. He needed to find a place for a new shop. He needed to understand the city, understand who trades there, who buys, who makes the decisions. Yunbo Hai asked how long he'd be gone. Daniel said a week, maybe 2. The shop in Qinghe would stay open. Zheng Yunho would keep an eye on the village. Peng would continue gathering supplies. Grandma May said he was sticking his neck out again where he could get killed. Daniel said people get killed less often in Yuncheng than in the villages. There are too many witnesses there. Grandma May snorted, but she put 3 flatbreads and a small bag of dried herbs for colds into his sack. In the morning, Daniel set out on the road, alone, a sack on his back. In the sack were 20 soul stones, 5 valuable items for sale, the Hushan shard tucked under his arm, and one thing he'd grabbed at the last minute, a small clay figurine of a bird, rough, crooked, molded by a child's hands. Grandma May's granddaughter had given it to him before he left. She said it was for good luck. Daniel appraised the figurine. Spiritual value, 0. Emotional value, low. The child had been molding it for 5 minutes. But the figurine was warm, and Daniel put it in his pocket instead of his bag. The journey to Yuncheng took 3 days, over a mountain pass, across the plain, past 2 villages, past a caravan of 6 wagons. Daniel walked and watched. He counted. The road was bad. Rocks, potholes, rickety bridges, but trade was going on. Wagons were moving. People were walking. Where people walk, there is demand. On the 2nd day of the journey, So Yuna caught up with him. He heard footsteps behind him, quick, light. He turned around. She was walking behind him. A hairpin glinted in her hair, a new scabbard on her back, not empty. She had found or bought a new sword somewhere, not her father's, a working sword. Daniel stopped. He asked why she was here. So Yuna said she had heard in Qinghe that the merchant had closed his shop and gone to Yuncheng. It's dangerous to travel alone. Daniel said he hadn't asked her to come. So Yuna said she hadn't asked his permission. They looked at each other. Then Daniel shrugged. He kept walking. So Yuna walked beside him, silently. She rarely spoke at all, but her presence was like a wall behind him, reliable, solid. Daniel wasn't used to this. In his past life, he had always been alone. Alone in the office, alone at auctions, alone in an apartment with boxes of other people's belongings. Here, walking beside him was a person who had chosen to be there. Not for money, not by contract, by choice. Yuncheng came into view on the 3rd day, from over the hill. First, the sound, a hum, like from a beehive. Then the smell, smoke and food and sweat and incense and manure and flowers, all together. Then the walls, tall, stone, gray with red gates, towers at the corners, flags of the 3 sects, the Scarlet Phoenix, the Azure Lotus Abode, the Jade Claw Sect. The 3 largest. Each has its own quarter, its own rules, its own people. Daniel and So Yuna entered through the eastern gate. The guard glanced at them briefly, didn't stop them. 2 poor people. There are thousands like them here. The city swallowed them up instantly. The streets are wide. There are so many people that for the first minute, Daniel just stood and watched. In Xie, he'd been to flea markets with 1,000 vendors. Here, the scale was different. Not 1,000, 10,000. Stalls in 3 rows, counters on every corner, goods ranging from turnips to flying swords. Cultivators in silk robes walked past peasants in rags. A world in miniature. The rich on top, the poor below, and between them, a chasm into which one could shout forever. Daniel didn't shout. He watched. He counted. For 3 days, he walked through Yuncheng, with Yun by his side, like a shadow. He went into every shop, looked at the goods, listened to the prices, talked to the merchants, the buyers, the apothecaries, the blacksmiths. He didn't buy. He didn't sell. He just watched and listened. By the end of the 3rd day, he knew enough. Yuncheng was suffocating. Not from poverty, from a monopoly. 3 sects controlled the entire market for spiritual goods. Prices were fixed. Quality was falling. There were no alternatives. Small merchants operated on a 5% margin and prayed that the sect wouldn't raise taxes. Apothecaries bought raw materials at triple the price from a single supplier. Blacksmiths stood idle because the sects import weapons from their own forges at a lower cost. The city is large, the city is rich, but the city is sick. It doesn't need yet another merchant. It needs someone who will break the monopoly. Quietly, carefully, through competition, through choice, through what is called open bidding at auctions. Daniel found a spot for a shop. Not in the commercial district. It's expensive and dangerous. In the artisan quarter, a quiet street, workshops, a dye house, a pottery shop, a carpenter shop, and one empty room between the dye shop and the tea house. A former pharmacy. The owner died. No heirs. The building belongs to the city council. Rent is 4 soul stones a month. Daniel paid 3 months in advance. 12 stones. More than he'd spent in all his time in Qinghe. But Yun En, that's a different game. Different stakes. Different prizes. She stood with Yun in the empty room. She looked at the dusty shelves, at the peeling walls, at the hole in the roof. She said she'd seen rat holes that were cozier. Daniel smiled. He said that in a month, she wouldn't recognize the place. The first week in Yunchen was spent renovating. Daniel patched the roof, so Yuna hauled boards. They hired a local boy for 2 pennies a day to sweep the floors and fetch water. The shop was taking shape. Not opulent, not gleaming. Clean, neat. The shelves were even. The counter was scrubbed white. The sign was the same. Khan's shop, appraisal, exchange, consultation. So Yun hung it above the door. She stepped back. She said there were 300 shops like this in the city. Daniel said there wasn't a single one like it. In the 2nd week, he started trading. Not in goods, in a service. He stood at the shop door in the morning. When craftsmen from neighboring workshops passed by, he greeted them. He said he was opening an appraisal shop. If anyone had old things, mysterious finds, or heirlooms from their grandparents, they should bring them in. Appraisals were free. The craftsmen glanced at him. Some nodded. Most walked right past. That's normal, Qinghe told himself. The same first empty days, the same skeptical looks, the same slow start. The first customer came on the 3rd day. A dyer from a neighboring workshop. An old man. His hands were blue up to his elbows from the dye. He brought a wooden box, a small one, with a secret lock. He hadn't been able to open it for 30 years. He'd inherited it from his father. Daniel took it. 10 seconds. A card. A box belonging to a master dyer of the Jin school. 210 years old. The secret lock is mechanical. Inside was a sample of fabric dyed using the lost method of azure immersion. The method is considered to have been lost 150 years ago. The fabric inside is the only surviving sample. The value of the box and its contents ranges from 80 to 120 soulstones for the right buyer. Daniel placed the box on the counter. He looked at the dyer. He told him what was inside. The dyer listened. His mouth opened wider and wider. Then it closed. Then it opened again. He said that his father had spent his entire life for the method of azure immersion. He died without finding it, and the method lay in a box he couldn't open. Daniel said he would help open it. The lock is mechanical. It requires a thin tool and patience. Soyun took a hairpin out of her pocket. A thin one, made of iron. Not a pin from her father's sword, just an ordinary hairpin. She held it out. Daniel took it. He fiddled with the lock for 5 minutes. It clicked. The lid opened. Inside lay a piece of fabric. Small, the size of a palm. The color was so blue it seemed the fabric was glowing. Deep, pure, like the sky above Mount Beishan on a clear day. The dyer took the fabric. His hands were shaking. He held it up to his eyes. He sniffed it. He rubbed it between his fingers. Then he pressed it to his chest. He began to cry. An old man with blue hands stood in a stranger's shop and wept over a piece of fabric. Daniel was silent. Soyun was silent. The young assistant peeked out from behind the door. Daniel gestured for him to leave. When the dyer had calmed down, Daniel said the fabric was worth a great deal. If sold, it could buy a house. The dyer shook his head. He said he wouldn't sell it. But if Daniel helped him recreate the method based on this sample, analyze the composition, understand the process, then he would work with Khan's shop. Dye fabrics, the best fabrics in Yuncheng. Exclusive. Daniel held out his hand. The dyer shook it. A craftsman's word, stronger than any contract. That evening, Daniel closed his eyes. He entered the auction. He posted a request. He needed an analysis of the dye's composition based on a fabric sample. The source world could be any world with a developed textile tradition. Payment: 1 appraisal service for an item from the buyer's world. An analyst from the Silk Road's world was found. The exchange took a minute. A small scroll with the dye formula lay in Daniel's palm. 14 ingredients. 8 of them are available on the Juhua continent. 6 will need to be found or substituted. But the foundation is there. The dyer would get his method. Khan's shop would get an exclusive fabric supplier. The first partner in Yuncheng. The word spread faster than in Qinghe. The artisan quarter was small. Everyone knew everyone. By the end of the second week, 5 people a day were coming to the shop. Not all of them with something valuable, but everyone left with an answer. Daniel worked just as he had in Qinghe. Honestly, he called trash trash, gold gold. People got used to it. They began to trust him. By the 3rd week, she came. Short, thin, about 19 years old. Dark hair braided into a plait. Her clothes were shabby but clean. The patches were neat. Her hands smelled of herbs. Her eyes were large, sad, polite. She bowed at the door. She apologized for the disturbance. She asked if it was true that they appraised things here. Daniel said it was true. She took a stack of paper out of her bag. Yellow, crumpled, covered in small handwriting. She placed it on the counter. She said these were her father's notes. He was a pharmacist. He was working on a formula. He didn't finish. He died. She doesn't know if these papers are worth anything or if they're just trash. Daniel took the stack. 10 seconds per sheet. He read slowly. He took his time. The cards unfolded, one after another. Drafts of a formula. The pill of the bright heart. A remedy for stabilizing spiritual consciousness. There are no equivalents on the continent. The formula is incomplete. The final stage of synthesis is missing. The last page is lost. Author: Li Jianguo, apothecary of Yuncheng, about 8 years ago. Cause of death. Daniel paused. Cause of death. Debt bondage to the Red Phoenix sect. Suicide. He placed the papers on the counter. He looked at the girl. Li Xiaomei, the apothecary's daughter, the very one he didn't yet know but was already waiting for. Because there is a law at auctions. The right thing always comes on its own. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. He said, "This isn't trash." Li Xiaomei looked up. He said, "Your father was working on a formula that has no equal. The pill of the bright heart. If this formula is completed, it will change the market for alchemical preparations throughout Yunchen, perhaps across the entire continent. Li Xiaomei stood there. Her lips trembled. She asked quietly, "So my father wasn't a failure?" Daniel said, "No. Your father was a genius who was missing just one page." Li Xiaomei sat down on the floor. Just like Su Yuna 2 months ago, her legs wouldn't hold her. She sat there and looked at the papers on the counter, at her father's handwriting, at the formulas she had considered useless for 8 years. Daniel waited. Then he said, "The missing page exists. 300 years ago, a traitorous student sold it to another world. He can get it through the auction, but he needs something from her." Li Xiaomei looked up. "What?" Daniel said. "A job. If he gets the page, she'll finish the recipe, and she'll become the chief alchemist of Han's shop." Li Xiaomei looked at him. Then she stood up. She bowed, low, lower than Zhang Yanho, to the floor. She said one word, "Yes." That evening, Daniel entered the auction. Retrieving the lost page of the recipe came at a high price. He put up the most valuable thing he had left, a collection of 4 items brought from Qinghe, plus a description, plus the story, plus the context, the lost legacy of the Li School of Pharmacy, the last page of a recipe that could have changed the world, but didn't, because its author was killed by the sex greed. A buyer from the world of 1,000 sorrows. Them again. A world that pays for grief, for injustice, for what was lost. The exchange took place. A rolled-up sheet lay in the palm of his hand. Yellow, old, the same handwriting, the same paper, the final stage of synthesizing the Bright Heart pill. In the morning, Daniel placed the sheet on the counter, next to the other papers. Li Xiaomei arrived early. She saw it, unfolded it, read it. Her hands were shaking. Then they stopped. Her eyes changed. Not sad, sharp, focused. She raised her head, said she needed a lab, ingredients, an oven, utensils. Daniel said it would happen, not today, but it would. Li Xiaomei nodded, rolled up the papers, put them in her bag, pressed them to her chest, and smiled for the first time. A small, quiet smile, but genuine. The 4th month. Han's shop in Yuncheng was open every day. Li Xiaomei took over the back room, turned it into a laboratory, an oven, cauldrons, mortars, scales. Daniel procured ingredients for her through the auction, one at a time, carefully, without drawing attention. Xiaomei worked from morning till night, quiet, focused. Sometimes she forgot to eat. Su Yuna would bring her rice and silently set it on the edge of the table. Xiaomei ate without looking, with one hand. With the other, she stirred the brew in the cauldron. So Yuna would shake her head and leave. She settled into the shop unnoticed, like a cat. She was just there, that's all. She slept by the door. She sharpened her sword in the mornings. She went to the market for food. She kept watch over the entrance. When someone entered too abruptly or too brazenly, she would rise from her seat, and that person would immediately become more polite. She did nothing. She just stood up. That was enough. Daniel ran the business. Customers came. Appraisal, exchange, consultation. By the end of the 4th month, more than 600 items had passed through Han's shop. 83 of them were valuable. The total value exceeded 1,000 soulstones. Daniel's commission was 115. Plus the shop in Qinghe, which was now run by Peng under the supervision of Zhang Yanho. The flow there was smaller, but steady, 20 stones a month. Daniel calculated, he thought, he planned, and he waited. Because he knew, silence never lasts forever. In the middle of the 4th month, a man entered the shop whom Daniel didn't know, but recognized instantly. By his clothes, by his bearing, by his scent. A red silk robe, not an official's, a warrior's. a delicate phoenix embroidery on the right shoulder, a sword at his belt, a young face, but old eyes, a disciple of the Scarlet Phoenix sect. Not an outer disciple, an inner one, higher rank, more dangerous. He entered. He looked around. So Yu rose from the doorway. Her hand rested on the hilt. The disciple glanced at her, not impressed. He approached the counter. He placed an envelope on it, red, with a phoenix seal. He said it was an invitation for the merchandiser Han, from the junior administrator of the Yuncheng branch of the Scarlet Phoenix sect. Dinner, tomorrow evening, at the Golden Carp restaurant. Refusal is not welcome. He turned around, left. Yu watched him go, her hand still on the hilt. Daniel opened the envelope, read it. The invitation was written in beautiful handwriting, polite, even warm. But between the lines, something else was written. We know who you are. We know what you're doing. We want to talk. Refusal means war. Daniel placed the invitation on the counter. He sat down. He thought. The Red Phoenix sect. Ho Jimin. The Golden Fan had recognized his face 3 months ago in the village, and now they'd found him. The question was what they wanted. If they wanted to kill him, why invite him to dinner? It would be easier to send an assassin at night. So it's not to kill. So it's something else. So it's a deal. Daniel smiled. Bargaining is his territory. Dinner at the Golden Carp restaurant. Daniel arrived in a patched robe, with Su Yun behind him. The doorman at the entrance looked at them as if they were cockroaches, but he let them in. An invitation bearing the Phoenix seal opens any door. The hall was large, beautiful, silk curtains, lacquered tables, the smell of roasted meat and sandalwood. A man was sitting at a table in the back, about 40 years old, overweight, well-groomed, soft hands, clean nails. Not a fighter, a bureaucrat. A smile like butter, greasy and slippery. The junior administrator of the Yuncheng office. His name was Wen Tian. He stood up. He bowed, not deeply, just enough to show politeness but not respect. He invited him to sit down. Daniel sat down. So Yun stood behind him. She didn't sit down. Wen Tian glanced at her. He smiled wider. He ordered food. A lot. Meat, fish, rice, vegetables, tea, wine. Daniel ate, calmly, without rushing. At auctions, the first rule of dinner with a competitor is eat their food, drink their wine, don't rush to speak, let them start. Wen Tian began, after his third cup of wine. He said that the Scarlet Phoenix sect was watching Khan's shop with interest. In 4 months, Khan, a merchandiser, had built a business from scratch at 2 locations. That was impressive, especially for a man without cultivation. No connections, no patronage. Daniel said he had patronage, a letter of recommendation from the Azure Lotus Abode. Wen Tian smiled. He said the letter protected the village, not a shop in Yuncheng. In Yunchen, different rules apply. Daniel nodded. He asked what exactly the sect wanted. Wen Tian took a sip of wine. He said the sect wanted a partnership. Khan's shop would receive the official patronage of the Scarlet Phoenix sect, protection, tax breaks, access to restricted markets. In exchange, Khan's shop would grant the sect the right of first refusal on all items above the 3rd rank, plus 20% of the turnover, plus exclusive information about valuable finds in the region. Daniel listened. His face was impassive. Inside, he was calculating. 20% of the turnover is robbery. The right of first refusal is a monopoly. Exclusive information is control. If he agreed, the shop would cease to be his. It would become a branch of the sect. Everything he had built would turn into a feeding trough for the people who burned the villages and killed the pharmacist Li Jiangguo, Xiaomei's father. Daniel took a sip of tea. He set down the cup. He looked Wen Tian in the eyes. He said the offer was generous, that he appreciated the sect's interest, and that the answer was no. Wen Tian stopped smiling. Not for long. Then the smile returned, but it was different, cold. He asked if the merchandiser Han understood what a refusal meant. Daniel said he understood. Wen Tian said that Yuncheng was a big city. Big cities were dangerous places. Shops burned down, merchants disappeared, accidents happened every day. Daniel nodded. He said he knew, and that he had a counteroffer. Wen Tian raised an eyebrow. Daniel took a small package out of his pocket. He unwrapped it. Inside was a pill, white, with golden veins, the first pill of the bright heart. Xiaomei finished it last night, the first batch. 3 pills. Daniel took one with him. He placed the pill on the table. He said, "The pill of the bright heart. It stabilizes spiritual consciousness. There's nothing like it on the continent. The recipe is exclusive, produced by Khan's shop. 1 now, 10 in a month, 100 in 6 months. Any sect that gains exclusive access to this pill will have an advantage over the other 8. Daniel looked at Wen Tian. "I don't sell exclusivity. I sell pills, to everyone, at market price. The Scarlet Phoenix sect can buy on equal terms with the rest, or they can choose not to buy. But if they try to shut down my shop, the pills will go only to my competitors." Wen Tian looked at the pill. His smile vanished, completely. For the first time that evening, his face was genuine. He was thinking, calculating, weighing his options. Daniel waited. Silence. Wen Tian picked up the pill. He examined it, sniffed it, put it back, stood up, said he would pass it on to the elders, left. Didn't say goodbye. Su Young exhaled. Daniel finished his tea. His hands weren't shaking. This time they weren't shaking. He was learning. When they returned to the shop, Xiaomei was waiting. She was standing by the door. Her eyes were huge. She asked what had happened. Daniel said they had just refused the Red Phoenix sect and survived. Xiaomei turned pale. Then she blushed. Then she said she needed to make 10 more pills by next week, and she went into the lab. So Yun sat down by the door. She took out a whetstone. She began to sharpen her sword, slowly, rhythmically. Daniel stood behind the counter. He looked out the window at the street. Somewhere in this city, Ho Zhimin is sitting. Somewhere in this city, spies from the 3 sects are already writing reports about the strange merchant from the mountain who refused the Crimson Phoenix and showed a pill without equal. The game has begun. The 5th month, the 6th. Time had sped up. Daniel was working. The shop in Yuncheng, the shop in Qinghe, the village of Quiet Springs. 3 points, 3 streams, 3 lives that needed to be sustained simultaneously. Peng in Qinghe had grown from a boy into a junior clerk. He had learned to assess simple things on his own. Daniel gave him a list of 20 signs. The smell of burnt honey means the spore of the 1,000 dreams mushroom. A ringing sound upon impact means spiritual metal. A bluish haze in the light means residual qi. Peng memorized it. He applied it. He made mistakes sometimes, but he was learning. Zheng Yonho was engaged in the living in the village. It was waking up, slowly. Every 2 weeks, the villagers gathered in a circle and sang. The common hearth ritual had become a tradition, not a magical rite, a tradition. People came because they wanted to sing together. Qi was a bonus. The field yielded its first harvest, white millet, heavy ears of grain. Grandma May cried when she cut the first sheaf. There was enough grain to feed the whole village for 3 months. For the first time in years, no one went hungry. People came to the village. Not many. 12 people in 2 months. Orphans, cripples, refugees from cleared settlements. Young Bohai took everyone in. Daniel said to take them in. Every new person is a pair of hands. Every pair of hands is work. Every bit of work is valuable. In Yuncheng, Xiaomei had ramped up production to 10 pills a week, the Bright Heart pill. Demand was frenzied. Daniel didn't sell directly to the sect, through middlemen, through Gu Weilin, through new merchants who came on their own. The price was stable, 20 soul stones apiece. Not cheap, not expensive, right on market value. 3 sects were buying through frontmen. Daniel knew. He pretended not to know. Let them buy. Let them get used to it. Let the addiction grow. So Yuna became both a shadow and a shield. She didn't leave. She didn't talk about the future. She just was. In the mornings, she sharpened her sword. In the afternoons, she stood by the door. In the evenings, she sat in the corner of the shop and repaired scabbards. Sometimes Daniel caught her gaze. Quick, indecipherable. She looked away. He didn't ask. There's a rule at auctions. Don't ask a question if you're not ready for the answer. One evening, she spoke first. They were sitting on the shop's roof. Daniel had gone out for some fresh air. Yuna followed him up. The city below was bustling. Lights, voices, distant laughter. She said she had a sister, a younger one. Her name was Sohana. Their father had told her to protect her sister. Yuna didn't protect her. The Jade Claw cult came at night. Her father went out with a sword. They killed him. Yuna grabbed her sister. They ran. Her sister stumbled. Yuna turned around. Too late. An arrow. Hana fell. Yuna ran on. Alone. With a shard of her father's sword. 7 years old. Daniel listened. He was silent. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say everything would be okay. At auctions, when someone tells the story of an item they've brought in, you don't offer comfort. You listen. Because sometimes a person doesn't need an answer. They need a listening ear. Yuna fell silent. She sat there. The wind ruffled her hair. The hairpin glinted. Her father's vow in her hair. Protect your sister. Unfinished. Forever unfinished. But now it didn't cut. Daniel said one thing. It's not your fault. Yuna didn't answer, but her shoulders dropped slightly, as if heavy had become a little lighter. The next day, there was an assassination attempt. Morning. Daniel was walking from the well to the bench, carrying water. An alley, a shadow, movement. He didn't have time to react. A blade flashed at his throat. So Yuna was faster. She appeared between him and the shadow, as if she had sprung from the ground. The clang of steel, a spark. The attacker flew back against the wall. Black clothing, a mask, a knife, not a sword. An assassin, not a warrior. So Yuna stepped forward. The assassin leaped onto the roof, disappeared. 3 seconds. It all took 3 seconds. Daniel stood with a bucket of water in his hands. Water spilled out. His hands were wet. His knees were wet. His heart was pounding. So Yuna turned to him. She asked if he was okay. He nodded. She looked at the roof where the assassin had vanished. Her eyes were cold, professional. She said it was a mercenary, mid-level, not directly from the cult. Someone hired him. Daniel set down the bucket, sat on the ground, right in the alley, he thought. They want to kill him, or scare him. More likely scare him. A mid-level mercenary for mid-level pay. A test, to see how he'd react, run or stay. Daniel stood up, picked up the bucket, walked into the shop. He didn't run. That evening he closed his eyes. He entered the auction. He needed protection. Not a sword, not a wall, not an army. Something else. Something that would make killing him unprofitable for everyone, he thought. He remembered. In a past life, an antique dealer from Brooklyn worked in a dangerous neighborhood. He was robbed 3 times. The 4th time, he kept it simple. He hung photos of his best clients on the wall. A senator, a district attorney, a police chief, a mobster's wife. All autographed, all with thank you notes. They stopped robbing him. Not because he had security, because his death would be a problem for too many people. Daniel formulated a request, not for an artifact, for information. He needed names, the names of the elders of the three sects represented in Yuncheng, and the names of their illnesses. The auction house refused. A restriction. The auction house doesn't trade in other people's secrets. But Daniel rephrased it. He wasn't asking for secrets. He was asking for public information about the health of public figures. In any world with advanced medicine, the health of leaders is a topic of discussion. The auction flickered. It responded. 3 names, 3 illnesses, not secrets, symptoms visible to any experienced physician. The elder of the Yunchen branch of the Scarlet Phoenix. Chronic exhaustion of the qi channels in the left hand. He hides it, but an experienced eye will notice how he always holds the fan in his right hand. The elder of the Azure Lotus Abodes delegation. Impaired qi circulation in the heart area. Shortness of breath when climbing stairs. Hides it behind a slow, stately gait. The elder of the Jade Claw branch. Degeneration of spiritual vision. Squints. Sits closer to the person he's talking to than is customary. Blames it on habit. 3 illnesses. 3 people who hide their weakness. And Daniel has Li Xiaomei, who can make not only the bright heart pill, who can make a personalized remedy for everyone. In the morning, Daniel wrote 3 letters. Polite, brief, to each elder personally, not through intermediaries. Through Gu Weilin, who knew all the couriers in the city. Each letter contained a single line. Dear Elder, I have heard that your left arm is troubling you, or your heart, or your eyesight. Please come to Khan's shop. The consultation is free. Sincerely, Khan. 2 days later, the first one arrived. Elder Jade Claw, a man in his 70s, tall, skinny, squinting. He sat down at the counter. He looked at Daniel. He asked how he knew about eyes. Daniel said that was his job, to see what others cannot see. The elder was silent. Then he nodded. A week later, all 3 came. Xiaomei prepared an individual treatment plan for each of them. 3 sets of pills, 3 prescriptions, 3 secrets that became bonds. Now, the 3 elders of the 3 sects have a personal stake in ensuring that Khan's shop continues to operate. Because only Xiaomei prepares their medicines. Because only Daniel knows their weaknesses. And because Daniel has never once used that knowledge as a threat, only as a help. There were no more assassination attempts. Year 1. The 8 Winds Auction, the largest trading hall on the Zhuhua continent. A round white stone building atop Trade Peak in the center of Yuncheng. The dome is painted with frescoes. 9 phoenixes, 9 lotuses, 9 claws, 9 of everything. The hall held 500 people. Today it was full. Elders of the 9 sects, their disciples, merchants, apothecaries, blacksmiths, collectors. And in the 3rd row on the right, a quiet man in a patched robe. Next to him, a girl with a hairpin. Behind him, a quiet girl with a bag smelling of herbs. To the left, a woman with an account book under her arm. Catherine Park. Daniel had met her 2 months ago. She was standing behind the counter of a tea shop in the slums of Yuncheng, selling fake tea to tourists. Daniel walked in, ordered tea, took a sip, set the cup down. He said in English, "This isn't Lunjing. It's just regular green tea, dyed with moon tree bark powder." Catherine dropped the teapot. She hadn't heard English spoken in 3 years. For 3 years, she'd survived alone in a foreign world. Without a system. Without auction. Without anything. Just her head. Just the language she'd learned in 6 months. Just the cynicism she'd built up like armor. She hit him, with her fist, in the jaw. Then she hugged him. Then she cried for half an hour. Daniel sat there and held her. Silently. Su Yun stood by the door and didn't understand a word, but she understood everything. Catherine told her story. The fire at the coffee shop on Broadway. Darkness, light, She woke up in a ditch in Yuncheng. 3 years, not a single familiar face, not a single word in a language that belonged to her and not to this world. She survived. She attached herself to the smugglers, then to the merchants. She learned to count. She learned to cheat. She learned not to trust. Daniel said he needed someone who knew Yuncheng from the inside, someone who knew how the underground worked, someone who could keep the books and not go crazy over the local counting system. Catherine said that she was expensive. Daniel pulled a small bundle out of his pocket. He unwrapped it. Inside were coffee beans, real ones, from Yemen, traded at the auction for a description of the taste of espresso from Daniel's memory. Catherine took a bean. She sniffed it. She closed her eyes. Her expression changed. The cynicism was gone. For a second, she was once again the student from New York who brewed coffee in the mornings and wrote a dissertation on cultural exchange practices. She opened her eyes. She asked when we were starting. Now Catherine was sitting in the Eight Winds auction hall with an account book containing the contracts. 3 contracts with 3 sects for the supply of the Lightheart pill, 2 contracts with independent trading houses, 1 contract with Gu Wei Lin for exclusive distribution in the eastern provinces. Emma Song sat next to Catherine. Daniel had met her a week ago. She had come to the shop on her own, a former inner disciple of the Azure Lotus Monastery, expelled for heresy. She had tried to prove to the elders that cultivation through exchange yields purer qi than cultivation through absorption. They laughed at her. They expelled her. She wandered from city to city. She wrote scrolls. She handed them out on the streets. They thought she was crazy. Then she heard about Khan's shop, about the merchant who exchanges things between worlds, who doesn't take but gives. She came. She saw how Daniel worked, how he closed his eyes, how the auction flickered in his mind, how objects came and went, equally, without violence, without theft. She sat down on the floor in the middle of the shop, right on the dirt floor. She said quietly, "So it all exists." Daniel didn't understand at first. Then he understood. All her life she had been proving in theory what he did practically every day. Exchange. Not war, not absorption. Exchange as the foundation. She had found her proof. Alive, in a patched-up robe, behind the counter. Emma brought a scroll. The theory of cultivation through equivalent exchange, the foundations of the Heshan civilization as interpreted by the modern school. Daniel read it. He didn't understand half the terms, but he grasped the essence. The world is dying not because there is little qi. The world is dying because qi does not flow. Sects hoard it. They lock it away. They hide it. Qi is like water. If it doesn't flow, it rots. Exchange is movement. Movement is life. Daniel knew this intuitively. Emma knew it in theory. Together, they knew it completely. Now, all 5 of them were sitting in the hall of the Eight Winds auction. Yuna with her hairpin, Xiaomei with her herbs, Catherine with her accounting, Emma with her scroll, and Daniel. The bidding was underway. Lots were being put up. Artifacts, pills, ores, scrolls with techniques. The elders of the 9 sects were bargaining, quietly, ruthlessly. Every lot was a battle. Every price was a weapon. Daniel watched, learned, waited. Then they brought it out. Lot number 47, a fragment of a blade, old, rusty, unidentified. The auctioneer announced, presumably from the 6 Pillars era, metal unknown, history of ownership unestablished, starting price 20 soul stones. Experts approached one after another. They looked, they shook their heads. They couldn't identify it. Too rusty, too old, too obscure. The auctioneer asked if there were any bidders. Silence. Daniel stood up. The room looked at him, at his patched robe, at the rags for shoes. Someone snorted. Someone frowned. Daniel walked up to the table. He picked up the shard. 10 seconds. The card unfolded. and the world stopped. A twin blade of the silver crescent, the other half is lost, 300 years old, belonged to General Zhao Feng, accused of treason by the Jasper Mountain sect, executed. The sword was cut in half. One half is here, the other. Daniel looked up. He scanned the room. Third row, seventh seat. A young woman, about 25, plain clothes, a pendant on a thin chain around her neck. A pendant made of dark metal in the shape of a crescent moon. Daniel placed the fragment on the table. He turned to the hall. He said, "This is not a sword." The hall fell silent. "This is half a sword. The other half is with the girl in the third row, seventh seat. She doesn't know that the pendant around her neck is the other half. Her grandmother melted the shard into a pendant 40 years ago to hide it from the sect that killed her husband. General Zhao Feng did not betray the Jade Mountain sect. He protected it. The proof is in the metal. If the halves are joined, an engraving will appear, an order from the sect leader regarding a secret mission. Zhao Feng was not a traitor, but a secret protector, and he was executed by those he protected." Silence. Absolute. 500 people and not a sound. The girl in the third row slowly raised her hand to her neck. She touched the pendant. Her lips trembled. Daniel said, "I'm not buying this lot. I suggest we return it to its owner." The girl stood up. Her hands were shaking. She walked over to the table. She took off the pendant. She placed it next to the fragment. Two halves, side by side. Daniel stepped back. The girl joined them together. The metal rang out, delicately, purely, just as John Yon-ho had described the sound of spiritual metal. Lines appeared on the joined blade, an engraving, Hanja characters, an order, secret, 300 years old, proof of innocence. The girl stood with the sword in her hands. She was crying. She didn't wipe away her tears. The hall was silent. The elders were silent. Then one of them, an elder, from the Jasper Mountain sect. He stood up. He walked over slowly. He looked at the engraving. He read it. He closed his eyes. He bowed to the girl, low, to the ground. 300 years of injustice, rectified in 10 seconds. Because one man knows how to see. Ho Min jumped up. Daniel saw him in the side row. A golden fan, wild eyes. He was screaming, "Imposter! Charlatan! Execute him! Who gave permission? How dare this clay?" The golden fan opened. Chi surged like a wave, hot, overwhelming. The hall shuddered. But behind Daniel stood So Yuna, a hairpin in her hair, her hand on her sword, silent. Ho Serin stood beside her. Daniel recognized her, even though he had only seen her once. She had come to Khan's shop a month ago, incognito. She brought a family brooch. She wanted to sell it. Daniel refused. He said the brooch belonged to the victim, not the giver, that it couldn't be sold. It had to be returned. He helped. Through an auction, he found the family to whom the brooch had belonged before the Ho family took it a generation ago. He returned it. Serene stood in his shop and looked at him as if he were a creature from another world. He didn't see Ho Jimin's sister. He saw a human being. Now Saren stood in the Ho family's full ceremonial attire. White silk, silver embroidery. It meant one thing. The family is officially distancing itself from Jimin's actions. The white robes on Saren are a public rejection. Xiao Mei stepped out from behind Daniel with a tray. On the tray were 9 pills, one for each elder of each of the 9 sects. Each one was unique. Each one was prepared for a specific illness that the elder had never told anyone about. Daniel knew. The auction had given him a hint. Xiao Mei had prepared them. This wasn't a threat. It was a gift. The most powerful gift in the world. The one that says, "I see you. I know you're hurting. Here's the medicine. For free." Catherine stood with an account book. She opened it. She showed it. Contracts. 3 sects had already signed. 2 more were on the way. Khan's shop isn't just a shop. It's a hub, a trading hub, a healing hub, information hub. To destroy it is to lose everything he has built. And he has built a great deal. In just 1 year. Emma unfurled the scroll. The Heshon Theory. Proof that exchange works. That the world need not perish. That war is not the only answer. Daniel stood before the assembly. He bowed, by the book, deeply, respectfully. He said, "Esteemed elders, I did not come to fight. I came to open a shop. Anyone who wants to, come in." He turned. He walked toward the exit, Yuna beside him, Xiaomei behind her, Catherine, Emma, Saren, 6 of them. The doors closed behind them. Silence in the hall. Ho Jimin was led away by his own men, the sect's guards. The golden fan was folded. His eyes were empty. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. How could one become stronger without destroying anyone? It was breaking him, from the inside, like a crack in the foundation. The elders sat. They looked at one another. Each held a pill, their own, personal, chosen just for them. One of them, an elder, from the White Cloud sect. He turned to his neighbor, asked quietly, "What time was his opening tomorrow?" The next morning. Daniel stood in front of Han's shop in Yuncheng, Yuna on his right, Xiaomei on his left. Catherine behind the counter was already counting. Emma was in the corner writing a new scroll. Zheng Yunho had arrived from the village during the night. He stood by the door, upright, calm. Grandma May had sent a bag of flatbreads and a note. "Danny, don't forget to eat." Daniel put the note in his pocket, next to the clay bird his granddaughter had molded. He took out the Hushan shard. He looked at it. A circle with 2 dots. Exchange. Balance. Somewhere in the mountains sits a blind old man who knows the truth. Daniel will find him. Later. Right now, something else. Right now, the door is open. The counter is clean. The tea is brewed. The first customer is already walking down the street. Daniel smiled. That very smile. Warm, slightly guilty, disarming. 12 years of auctions, 1 death, 1 rebirth. 1 year in a world that is dying, and 1 shop that heals it. 1 item at a time, 1 person at a time, 1 story at a time. He straightened the sign. Khan's shop. Appraisal, exchange, consultation. Open.